Chapter 1. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Rebirth. WLSB Chapter 1 TL. NU, Hermit Editor. Hermit TLC. Hermit. This chapter is just a teaser. I do not plan on picking up this project full time, but I decided to translate a few chapters since I had some free time. Most of this chapter was translated by Lolalili on a spoiler thread on, but I edited it here and there. Enjoy. Chapter 1. Rebirth. Shu Ning lay on the hospital bed with blurred vision, wondering, in the end, what happened. In prison, it was common to fight and scheme against each other. Fighting and gangs forming were everyday events. During noon today, two people started fighting and Shu Ning got dragged into it. As he dodged, he was unlucky and tripped, falling from the second floor, causing his head to split open, covering the floor with blood. Bad luck really can't be blamed on society. It seemed. He wasn't going to make it. His body felt weaker and weaker, his head felt heavier and heavier, and he couldn't even hear the surrounding sounds clearly anymore. Shu Ning wasn't scared, it even felt like he was free of all his worries. His life was such a huge failure that it was practically a joke. As a child, he was an illegitimate child brought up by his maternal grandmother, envying those children who had their parents' love. In a sudden turn of events when he was in middle school, his mother returned. She cried bitterly while holding Shu Ning remorsefully. She said that they would never be separated again and wished that their family of three could live happily together. Shu Ning, who desperately craved familial love, threw himself into his mother's embrace without the slightest hesitation. As he experienced the unfamiliar warmth and familial love, he was ecstatic and fully believed in her. The him then was really naive. How was it possible that a cold-blooded woman who had abandoned her child for so many years could suddenly treat that child well? In order to see his mother smile and to live up to her expectations, Shu Ning worked hard to improve himself, protect his younger brother, and curry favor with his birth father. He lived cautiously and conscientiously, so wary and vigilant that he was even afraid to buy his favorite sports car. He could only drive a low-profile, dependable, black Audi. Secretly, Shu Ning fiercely fought against his birth father's oldest son. He naively listened to his mother's lies and thought that his parents were true love partners and that his older brother Shu Hein was the product of an arranged marriage that shouldn't have ever existed. Shu Ning even felt that his childhood of suffering in the rural village and the separation of his parents were all Shu Heng's fault. Shu Ning exhaled and closed his eyes as he was starting to feel sleepy. At that moment, there was a commotion outside as if a VIP was coming. Shu Ning smiled bitterly. In the past, wasn't he a cool young rich master? Otherwise, how could his vain boyfriend happily pretend to be a begonia? How else could his miscreant friends call him brother? Shu Ning pretended to be a well-behaved youth in front of everyone, but he was secretly performing misdeeds. When he got thrown in jail, he found himself even more alone. His former best friend specially came to kick him while he was down. Now that he thought about it, he was really dumb. He clearly didn't have the skills, yet he put his all into creating mischief. When he thought back onto it, Shu Ning felt his reflection was unfamiliar. The door opened, and many people came in. How is he? A low, mellow, and rich voice was particularly attractive, displaying a man's carefully reined-in, ferocious temper. A penetrating gaze settled on Shu Ning's deathly pale face. The hospital director and the doctor both broke out in a cold sweat. The man they had just sent over wasn't going to make it and had no hope of resuscitation. By President Shu's appearance, it seemed as if he had a deep relationship with this man who was about to die. Shu Hein is a powerful man. Resolute and decisive, he could be classified as the lord at the top of the food pyramid. Our hospital cannot afford to offend him. The hospital director organized his thoughts and tactfully explained, "We were told that he was wounded too deeply in jail and wasn't sent over immediately for emergency treatment. Because of the long delay, he's already dying." The normally expressionless Shu Heng frowned. His special assistant immediately got the hint and sent the doctor and hospital director out of the room. President Shu, don't be too sad. The prison warden is my old classmate. According to your wishes, I had already greeted him and asked that he take extra care of second young Master Shu. I'm sorry that this accident happened. My condolences. The special assistant bent at a 90-degree angle in apology. He was very uneasy as cold sweat soaked his back. Accident. Yes, the special assistant was afraid to rise. Investigate, yes. The special assistant left at once. His legs felt like jelly. If President Shu requested an investigation, that meant that someone hurt second young Master Shu. Damn it. The special assistant's eyes turned cold. Being one of the few that knew of President Shu's birth history, the special assistant would never dare to look down on Shu Ning, the real crown prince. If second master hadn't been incited by his birth mother into having no feelings for his birth father and not having the ability to succeed the company, why would President Shu condescend to hand over the expensive management company to allow second master collect dividends and comfortably live an aristocratic life? The grace of adoption that he had received could not be recompensed. It was extremely quiet in the room. Shu Heng sat for 10 minutes before getting up. That year, I didn't release the evidence of your mother's and your crimes. I only collected the evidence to force your mother to give up on the right of inheritance and be content with her lot. She would stay Mrs. Shu and live in the main house with no decreases in her living expenses. Yet I didn't expect that she'd rather you take the fall before allowing Shu Yao relinquish the right of inheritance and ran away that very night. If you hadn't had a DNA test, I really suspect that you aren't her child. She's made quite a few small movements lately. I don't know if she had anything to do with what happened to you right now, but I think it's very likely. If you die, she has a reason to come back and live in the main house again to act against me. For Shu Yao, her younger son who is almost an adult, she is willing to give up on you. After all, she has 20% of the company's shares. If you add on yours, she has a chance of winning. You should go peacefully. If it really was her, I will take care of it. Shu Heng looked at Shu Ning determinedly, then turned and left. When the door closed, a tear trickled out of the corner of Shu Ning's eye. What an awful truth. That year when the criminal evidence was being reported all over the place by the media and Shu Ning fell from grace, his mother cried as she took out a contract pertaining to his shares. The beneficiary was his blood brother Shu Yao. At the time, Shu Ning felt like it was a matter of course in case something happened to him because he couldn't let Shu Heng, that bastard, off lightly. It was extremely ridiculous that the familial love he had been looking forward to for so long only amounted to this. Even though his mother had not come to visit him over so many years and didn't make a single phone call, Shu Ning kept finding reasons to calm his feelings of dissatisfaction. Shu Yao was still little. Mother needed to take care of him while opposing Shu Heng. She naturally couldn't break away to visit someone in jail. In actuality, the reason why he could live so comfortably in jail was because Shu Heng had organized it. Big brother. I'm sorry. All this time, I was naive and misunderstood you. If only I hadn't fought against you from the beginning and was an obedient little brother, would everything end up differently? After all, no matter how Shu Ning provoked him, Shu Heng never dealt with him harshly. In contrast, it was his birth mother who. Regret and remorse mixed together. Shu Ning, who had been numb, suddenly started to feel pain beyond endurance. A white light shone so brightly in front of his eyes that he couldn't even open them. His body felt as if it was going to dissolve. I feel awful that I don't want to die. Who's shouting? Shu Ning, Shu Ning. How are you? Ah. Don't scare me. Shu Ning. Hey hey hey. My God. So much sweat. Should I call an ambulance? Shu Ning, wake up. Or I'll go find the teacher. Calling a teacher for help seemed like something from the faraway past, like something a child would do in elementary school. Shu Ning, Shu Ning. So loud. Shu Ning felt agony as he sat up and opened his eyes. The scene he took in was extremely strange. There was a long cabinet in front of him and it even had names on it. He looked down to see a washbowl, soap, shampoo, and other toiletries thrown together chaotically. It was all products from 20 years ago. Shu Ning rubbed his aching temples to ease his awful headache. Then he gazed into a pair of extremely worried eyes which cleared his head. Class monitor. The class monitor raised an eyebrow. You, are you okay? Are you a person or a ghost? Did you have a nightmare? The class monitor waved his hands in front of Shu Ning. When he saw his black pupils following his movements, he felt relieved. You scared me to death. Did I scare the pee out of you? Me too. This little lord stopped peeing the bed 800 years ago. The class monitor angrily jumped up off the bed, ashen-faced. I worried about you, yet you are laugh at me. Shu Ning grimaced, then looked at his run-down dormitory and his naggy, annoying yet warm-hearted and kind class monitor. His mind went blank and his ears rang. Could it be that I've been reborn? How could it be? It's too weird. But the light of hope was like a weed he couldn't ignore and made him anxious to seek proof. Class monitor, when is this? I mean month, day, year. I don't blame you for not studying well, but not having common knowledge is too tragic. As the class monitor, I should tell you without asking for anything in return, blah 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 non-stop torrent. For the first time, Shu Ning listened to the class monitor speak with patience and felt very warm. In the past, the person he disliked the most was the class monitor who wielded his good studies to lecture others. He was also tall, good at sports, and handsome. All the teachers liked him. Why? But now, Shu Ning collected the useful information. He learned the approximate time he had returned to in his middle school days as well as some things he'd forgotten. Shu Ning's expression darkened suddenly. What's wrong? Finding me bothersome again? It's for your own good that I'm saying so much, okay? I understand. Thank you, class monitor. The class monitor's eyes lit up like a husky looking for praise. He sat back down by the bed and started to nag again. Shu Ning lowered his head and didn't listen to a word. Today is the day that his eldest aunt came to the school. Why wasn't he reborn before his grandmother passed away? He really wanted to see her again. His heart felt heavy and he couldn't breathe. Shu Ning smirked. Eldest aunt. Since I've come back, I won't let you steal grandmother's assets again and secretly throw her corpse deep into the mountains like trash. We should settle some old scores. Right at that moment, a student came in. Shu Ning, the teacher asked you to go to the office. Your eldest aunt came. Hermit's notes. I am doing this without an editor, please inform me of any mistakes. Chapter 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Rebirth. WLSB Chapter 2 TL. Hermit Editor. Hermit TLC. Hermit Chapter 2. The Best Relative's Eldest Aunt. Classmate. Looking at your face that's completely straight, do you even know what eldest plus aunt means? It's a good thing there were no girls around, or Shu Ning would never be able to wash himself clean, even if he had jumped into the Yellow River. Shu Ning massaged his temples due to the headache he had, then bent down to wear his shoes. As the dormitory had no toilets, he couldn't take a shower, but at least a mirror was provided. Shu Ning wore a set of washed-out uniform, a pair of old shoes, which had been worn by the next-door neighbor's son, which then had been passed on to his maternal grandmother, which finally had been given to Shu Ning to wear. In the rural areas, such things were very common. All the households would pass on their belongings to others who could use it. The youth in the mirror was small and withered, looking as if there was no nourishment. His hair was yellowed and slightly long. Oversized clothes hung on his thin frame. No matter how one looked, the youth looked ill. A small face, large palms, whitened lips, at least his facial features were delicate, and a pair of large eyes that still could be looked at. The class monitor curiously leaned over. "What are you looking at?" The teacher was calling urgently. Xu Ning smiled slightly, turning back to pat the class monitor that was taller than him by one head. "I'm so jealous of you, I want to drink milk." "Ah." Xu Ning waved a bit and left, leaving with an air of unfathomable mystery, causing the class monitor to look at him thoughtfully. In the teacher's office, a sorrowful performance called "I'm Crying, Pitiful, Feeling Bad, Quickly Console Me was being put on. The teacher in charge of the class was kind, continuously handing over tissues, comfortingly patting the back of a married lady, while the lady had cried till her eyes were red, and was choking back tears as she told of the situation at home. Then, in the future, who will Xu Ning live with? The teacher in charge was very worried about his student's future, pulling at the lady's hand. Is it possible to get in contact with Xu Ning's parents? The lady's whole body jolted, a sneer appearing on her face for a split second before she suppressed it. "AI, don't mention them, if they really cared, the child wouldn't have been passed to me to take care of. Most country bumpkins would have been lucky to even graduate from primary school." I pitied Xu Ning, so I wanted to let him graduate from middle school, but Mother has left already. Even if I wanted to, I can't send him. No matter the era, no teacher wanted their student to drop out of school. Once the lady suggested that, all the teachers' backs stiffened up, and their gazes all turned to look at the lady. At one side, the unmarried male teacher sighed unendingly, thinking inwardly that this relative was really pitiful, at least he could help a bit. Thus he took $200 out of his wallet and put it on the table. The rest of the teachers were also willing to help others, and the married ones couldn't be too generous. One took out $50, another $30, whatever they could take out, they contributed, altogether close to $500, $600. Nowadays teachers' wages weren't high, at most it was about $200, slightly higher than the average white-collar worker. This amount of money was equivalent to about a few months of farming in the village. Once Qin Yuji glanced at it, her heart was full of happiness, crying even more enthusiastically. Xu Ning stood at the office door, raising his eyebrows. This woman even deceived teachers. If it wasn't for him wanting to calm down because of his rebirth and thus not going in immediately, maybe in this whole life, he wouldn't ever know that Qin Yuji could be this disgraceful. Once a person is shameless, they won't even be afraid of ghosts. The maternal grandfather died early, so maternal grandmother suffered bitter hardship her whole life to bring up 4 children. The eldest Qin Yuji married early with 2 children, 1 son and 1 daughter, both older than Xu Ning. The second child, Qin Yulan, also married early with 3 children, 1 son 2 daughters, the smallest was younger than Xu Ning. The third child Qin Yuzhua was Xu Ning's mother, working overseas, has never returned. The fourth child Qin Yufu was the only male child amongst the 4 siblings, unmarried and was working at a construction site. Knocking on the door, Xu Ning entered after getting permission. The crowd gathered around Qin Yuji as if they were stars crowding around the moon. Her gaze swept towards the pile of money, quickly placing it in her purse, before looking towards the door, immediately beginning to cry again. "Xu Ning, quickly come over here, eldest aunt has something to tell you." Wanting the deed to the house, who didn't know that? Xu Ning walked over obediently, letting the teacher in charge to hold his hand. "Xu Ning, this. In a while, whatever you hear, don't be too sad." A few other teachers also said a few words to him. Xu Ning's mood was dim. Actually, his maternal grandmother had already died. Qin Yuji sighed. "Your maternal grandmother was hospitalized. All along, she didn't want to tell you because she was worried you'd be distracted and wouldn't focus on your studies, but now. Eldest aunt also has no other means. Your grandmother needs to undergo surgery. Your aunt's savings also can't make up for the cost. We can only sell the house." Xu Ning kept his head lowered. Eldest aunt wants to sell her own house. Nonsense. Qin Yuji shouted, then quickly realized her mistake and took a tissue to wipe the corners of her eyes, holding back the anger in her heart, thinking in her heart that this piece of paper was very important. I have 2 children at home, a family of 4. When your maternal grandmother is discharged, she will definitely want to stay with us, and you as well. Huh, living with a corpse. Really shameless. Xu Ning lifted his head, who didn't know how to put on a show, his whole face full of grievances. What about uncle? The corners of Qin Yuji's mouth moved a bit, her whole face full of dissatisfaction. Him. He's already working, didn't even contribute a cent when hearing about such a big matter as mother being hospitalized. I don't have such a cruel and unscrupulous brother, when he comes back I'll also chase his away. In face, this uncle had been scrimping and saving, all his money had been sent to eldest aunt, after second aunt knew about that, also came to ask for a portion, and even omitted the fact that his mother was already dead. When that uncle wanted to come home to celebrate the Lunar New Year, they wouldn't allow it, wanting him to continuing working to send more money back in order to line their pockets. 2 years had already passed before uncle had met a fellow villager, and was finally enlightened as to his mother's death. Eldest aunt and second aunt cried while saying that they were worried he'd be sad, so they didn't tell him. Uncle was naive and had been easy to trick ever since young, so he immediately kowtowed and wept tears to show his remorse. All the people in the office were very sympathetic. Every family had its problems, there were both good and bad apples in each basket. The teacher in charge comfortingly patted eldest aunt's shoulder. Xu Ning laughed grimly in his heart, continuing to act pitiful. We can't do that. That year when mother sent me to the village, she was worried that it would be hard to maternal grandmother, so she left $5,000 and built 3 houses, to ensure that maternal grandmother could continue to live with uncle and me. You're lying. At that time, just how old were you? How would you know? Qin Yuji agitatedly stood up, her saliva spraying madly. If your mother had money, why would she abandon you? Xu Ning's eyes reddened. If eldest aunt doesn't believe, you can ask uncle. I don't care whose money was used to build the house, but in any case mother's hospitalization and operation fees need money. This house has to be sold. Where was the house deed hid? Kept. You come with me to go back and find it. Actually, the house in the village didn't have much left. Eldest aunt and second aunt were both extremely avaricious, whatever they could sell they'd already sold, even digging a meter into the ground, they still couldn't find the house deed. Eldest aunt was a little more clever than second aunt, so she set her sights on Xu Ning. In the last life, Xu Ning rushed back with eldest aunt to find it, wanting to sell the house and the land to cure his maternal grandmother. That time he was really stupid, wanting to go to the hospital to visit maternal grandmother, but eldest aunt said to properly study, since she would be there, and Xu Ning believed her. The teachers couldn't bear to see it, but this was other people's household problems. It wasn't good for them to interfere too much, but it happened to be lunchtime, the students were entering and leaving, there were many who were watching the scene. When Xu Ning thought of his maternal grandmother, he really started crying. The house already doesn't belong to the Qin family. Qin Yuji was frightened, and immediately darted forward to grab Xu Ning's collar, her whole face turning green. What do you mean by that? You don't mean that you don't want to sell it, right? Your maternal grandmother worked so hard to bring you up. It wasn't easy for her to endure all sorts of hardship to raise you up. Where has your conscience gone? You can even live there even after getting married. You're so greedy, really raised an ingrate. If time could flow backwards, we should have abandoned you. Eldest aunt, did you just come from the hospital? Yes. How's maternal grandmother? Of course she doesn't feel well, the doctor said that she needs to undergo surgery as soon as possible. Don't ask so much, just quickly go with me. When saying all this, Qin Yuji's expression was a slightly unnatural. Xu Ning's gaze was suddenly sharp as a knife, harshly staring at Qin Yuji. For a short while, the lady was so scared that she shifted her gaze away, but to think that the brat dared to stare at her, and was immediately became fierce, almost lifting Xu Ning off the floor by his collar. A woman that did farm work was really strong. Strong and sturdy, once she became fierce, she was very difficult to deal with. The teacher held on to Qin Yuji's arm. Older sister. You calm down, he's still a child, persuade him nicely. What persuade nicely, he's so shameless, Pei, no matter what he has to go with me today. Mother's illness can't wait. Qin Yuji was disinclined to continue act like a saint in front of these dumb teachers, glaring and spitting out her words harshly. Shu Ning, you waste of money, if you dare to disagree, I'm doing to break your legs today. The house has already been sold for a while, if not there wouldn't have been enough to let maternal grandmother stay in hospital for one day. Shu Ning laughed gloomily. Besides, maternal grandmother had no savings to speak of. Hasn't all of uncle's money he earned from the construction site been sent to you? What nonsense are you spouting? Nonsense. Maternal grandmother's corpse has yet to cool, lying in the morgue, yet here you are trying to pocket her assets. All the teachers in the office were dumbstruck, the many students at the door all started whispering, even their gazes became unkind. Hey, this unfilial grandson spouting rubbish. I'll beat you to death. Qin Yuji felt as if she was being burned, surrounded by disdainful gazes and sneers, as if they were looking at something extremely unsightly. It was as if a slap had landed on her face, like a clown put on the spot. Once she thought of those 3 large houses that were extremely valuable, how could it be gone just like that? The selfish Qin Yuji became irrational, lifting her arm high up, even shaking off the teacher in charge. The male teachers on the side quickly grabbed onto her, and barely held her back. As it suddenly became a messy situation, the male teachers that only just graduated from university weren't her opponents, and Qin Yuji lifted her leg to kick Shu Ning's stomach. If it was before his rebirth, he would definitely have been injured, but Shu Ning smoothly dodged, while making seem as if his stomach had really been kicked. The female students shrieked, and a male student stepped forward bravely to support Shu Ning, or he would have fallen down. Shu Ning bit his tongue to let blood flow out. Which of us is lying, can be found out just by calling the hospital to check. Blood. The timid students were so scared that they shivered, the teachers were even more indignant, all helping out. Qin Yuji didn't achieve her goal, how could she leave the matter at that? Sitting on the floor to cry, swearing away, cursing at Shu Ning all the way. The teachers were all cultured adults, where would they have ever seen such attitudes? It was a good thing the head teacher had seen many of this type of people. After coming over to take a look, quickly shouted. If you don't leave, we'll call the police to arrest you. Qin Yuji was an avaricious person, but she was scared of the police, and glared at Shu Ning. You just wait. Leaving. That's not so easy, Shu Ning quickly shouted. Leave behind the money you tricked from the teachers. Shu Ning knew her too well, to ask her to take out the money was as painful as stripping off her skin. Since it's entered my purse, it's mine. The head teacher was tall and strong, and was so angry that his eyebrows raised up, grabbing onto the clothes of Qin Yuji who was preparing to run away. Committing fraud will land you in prison. This scared someone with no knowledge and experience. Trembling, she took the money out, as if it was the same as wanting her life. After the shrew left, the teacher in charge held on to Shu Ning, looking him over, as he was still worried. I'll take you to the hospital to visit a doctor. It's okay, teacher, thank you. I'd like to request for a few days off. I'd like to take care of maternal grandmother's funeral arrangements before coming back to school. Shu Ning's gaze was resolute, there was still another battle to be fought, he was really looking forward to it. Hermit's Notes. The chapter title. The best relatives is meant as a sarcastic remark. Eldest plus aunt. Usually, great aunt is used to refer to a female's monthlies, but for consistency's sake, edit as eldest instead of great as it wouldn't have made sense in this context. But mother has left already, even if I wanted to, I can't send him. It conflicts with the story as the eldest aunt was trying to trick others by saying her mother was still hospitalized, but the Ross here show her as saying that the maternal grandmother has just passed away. I left it as it is to keep the translated version as close to the Ross as possible. Pei. The equivalent of pa, to spit in contempt. Chapter 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Rebirth. WLSB Chapter 3 TL. Hermit Editor. Hermit TLC. Hermit Chapter 3. Attack his heart. Looking at your aunt, it seems as if she'll make trouble for you. The male teacher wrinkled his eyebrows, his face full of worry. Do you have anyone else at home? Xu Ning was very touched. Yes, I will contact my uncle and go back with him. Xu Ning only left after repeatedly thanking the teachers and surrounding students. The teacher in charge blinked her eyes, feeling that the Xu Ning that had an inferiority complex and used to walk around his head lowered, seemed to have grown up within a night. The change was so significant that it was as if the sky and earth had turned upside down. That perfectly straight back that was neither servile nor overbearing, that sincere gaze, and that indescribable sense of maturity, was it a good or a bad thing? Perhaps because he had to experience too much, thus he had no choice but to mature early. This poor child, the teacher sighed. Xu Ning calmly headed to the dining hall to have his meal, as the majority of the students had already finished eating, so there was no need to queue up, actually saving him some trouble. After all, he had mingled with the rich and powerful for many years. It was easy for him to automatically emit an aura of nobility, exuding a simple elegance. He ate slowly and deliberately, waiting for someone to walk right into the trap. Not long after, the class monitor ran over, his forehead covered in sweat. Xu Ning. I've heard about everything that happened in the teacher's office. How are you? The feeling of someone being concerned for him was really good. Xu Ning curved his eyes up in a smile. It's nothing. What nothing? The class monitor was so angry that he even jumped up. You even got hurt until you bled. How is that nothing? Let's go, I'll go with you to the doctor to take an X-ray. No need. Xu Ning had finished eating, pulling down the class monitor to sit, giving him his untouched cup of water to relax his tone. I want to contact uncle to go to the hospital to visit maternal grandmother, and I'll go for a checkup at the same time. Class is about to start, finish the water and quickly go. Xu Ning, my condolences. Xu Ning patted the class monitor's shoulder. You're a good friend, thank you. The class monitor, however, looked at him askance. Do you have money to make a telephone call? No, that's why I was waiting for you, and you really came. I'm really grateful. Class monitor. The class monitor, who was worried for Xu Ning, would rather skip a class, wanting to stay around Xu Ning, holding his hand as if he were an elder brother coaxing a younger brother, walking to the small shop. In the shop sat an amiable aunt who wore glasses. The class monitor easily insisted on helping Xu Ning to press the numbers. Only after the call was picked up, did he pass the phone to Xu Ning. At this very moment, the exhausted Xu Ning's voice was rough. Uncle. N. Uncle. N. Uncle. N. Class monitor. Just what on earth is happening here? Only after repeatedly calling uncle for a few times, then did Xu Ning manage to heal that heart-wrenching pain he felt. In the past, when he first went back with his mother, as he was worried, uncle still came over to see him now and then. But the Xu Ning who had mingled with the rich and wealthy had started thinking and acting like Qin Yuhua, thinking that his uncle was trash that shouldn't have surfaced, completely ignoring him. Although his uncle was simple, but after a while his smiles became weak. Knowing that Xu Ning lived well, and didn't like himself, he didn't visit anymore. Truth was, uncle treated others with honesty and didn't deceive others, just that his personality was slow and prudent, his brain worked slowly, not knowing how to use honeyed words to flatter others, thus naturally he couldn't win against other people who had put in more effort. Uncle, maternal grandmother passed away. Xu Ning choked out those words with emotion. The pain he had experienced in the past, it was still as painful when experiencing it now, but since he traveled back, naturally, he couldn't let them get away with things. Maternal grandmother already fainted 10 days ago. It was discovered by the neighbor Aunt Zhang. Uncle Lee's family had a car, so they sent maternal grandmother to the hospital to be treated, and even paid $200 first. After eldest aunt and second aunt knew about this, they weren't willing to pay the fees. They didn't even return the money, delaying the optimal time for treatment. Maternal grandmother passed away. In our village, there is the custom of leaving the house to the son. Eldest and second aunt were scared that maternal grandmother would leave all her assets to her only son, so they already sold anything of value in the house, and because they couldn't find the housing deed, today, eldest aunt came to the teacher's office and beat me until I spat blood. As uncle heard this, his mind drew to a blank, not wanting and unable to believe what he had heard, his hands shivering madly, completely unable to accept that his elderly mother had just gone like this. He still hadn't married a wife, hasn't been filial to her. Tears flowed unendingly down a tanned face, pursing his lips, so full of grief that he was momentarily unable to speak. The foreman at his side looked at him askew. The public telephones in the past were very loud. If one was standing nearby, they could hear every single word. The other party's silence made Xu Ning disappointed. That painful way of speaking immediately changed into a sharp blade. How much money did you send to eldest aunt? If she had given maternal grandmother some living expenses, would maternal grandmother need to brush metal film to make money to pay my school fees? Even if I say so much, you don't believe me, right? I understand your feelings of wanting to trust your kin, but you also have to judge for yourself if they are human. Xiao Ning. This voice was incomparably gloomy and hoarse, causing people to feel extremely unwell. I know, blood relations are a kind of unbreakable spell. His hand being held by the class monitor, Xu Ning's heart felt warm and he continued to attack his heart. Uncle, eldest and second aunt won't fish out a single cent to bury maternal grandmother. They would even find all sorts of reasons to push away the responsibility, finding all sorts of reasons to sell the house. You come back today, borrow $2,000 just to be prepared. We'll go the hospital to see maternal grandmother, at the same time ask the nurses, then go back to the village and ask the neighbors. Alright, I'll listen to you. The Qin Yu Fu, whose IQ had become as messed up as a ball of string, felt as if his ears were buzzing. Putting down the telephone receiver, the class monitor immediately paid, pulling Xu Ning to sit on the nearby flight of steps. He was very emotional. The mouth that was usually pretty impressive, was somehow unable to say any words of comfort. As his face blushed, the class monitor, who had never seen the evils of society, made a decision. I'll stay here and keep you company. Xu Ning was very tired, his head tilted, leaning onto the class monitor's shoulder. Bai Peng, from now on we'll be good friends. Ah. The class monitor scratched his head, puzzling over what he heard. Weren't we friends all along? Xu Ning finally laughed. His laugh was sincere and without guilt. After all, his outward appearance was a 13-year-old youth. The foreman drove his car and sent uncle to the school. There was no need to exchange greetings, letting Xu Ning get on the car hurriedly. Qin Yu Fu wished that he could grow a pair of wings to fly to his mother's side. The class monitor held on the car window that had been wound down, looking at the two tanned men, neither of them looking like Xu Ning. Which one was his uncle? In any case, the class monitor knew they were rushing for time, so he quickly opened his mouth. I'm the class monitor of class 3, Bai Peng. The teacher wanted me to tell you that Xu Ning was beaten up by his aunt until he bled. The reason was that they wanted the housing deed to sell the house to pay for the operation fee. A teacher was a sacred job. The words spoken by a teacher were very important. However, this class monitor Bai Peng lied, but he did not regret. When his good friend called earlier, he did not mention the health checkup, but since they needed to go to the hospital, they could find out the truth just by asking any nurse they came across. Bai Peng let go of the car window, glancing at Xu Ning. Good friend, my ability is limited, I can only help you till here. Xu Ning nodded his head a few times. If he said thank you now, it would be regarding him as an outsider. The car disappeared in an instant. Bai Peng stood at the roadside, feeling that he really was insignificant. He couldn't do anything. Suddenly, an idea came to mind. there were many students in the school who were from the same village as Shu Ning. Rumors and slanders could kill invisibly, he. After the car reached the hospital, the foreman didn't leave, following Shu Ning and Qin Yu Fu to inquire, and found the morgue. Standing outside and leaning against the wall, the foreman held an unlit cigarette in his mouth, narrowing his eyes, listening to the broken-hearted crying sounds coming from inside. After an hour, Qin Yu Fu cried until his was tired, completely unable to stand. The foreman pulled him up. "All right, what are you doing in the morning? Quickly bury the elderly and let her go to rest." Nodding non-stop, the Qin Yu Fu and Shu Ning today cried unstoppable tears. Shu Ning also saw his maternal grandmother's corpse for the first time. Naturally his real feelings were revealed. However, something still had to be done. Shu Ning couldn't not be mentally alert. If he was spiritless, his eldest and second aunt would take advantage of his uncle till he died. "Uncle, let's go ask the doctor in charge." The foreman was more experienced in the ways of the world. As the child kept saying that the eldest and second aunt were utterly heartless, he somewhat found it unbelievable. The person who died was their biological mother. Thus, he pulled Qin Yu Fu along to determine the truth. Shu Ning didn't follow. Some things couldn't be solved just by telling them. Letting them find out the truth for themselves would be better. From the doctor in charge, chief nurse, after they learned of the situation regarding payments and the general situation, Qin Yu Fu was utterly stunned. From when his elderly mother had been hospitalized to when she died, only $250 in fees had been paid, and it had even been paid for first by the neighbor. The truth was like a knife lodged in his heart. It felt intolerable. The foreman placed the cigarette near his nose and sniffed it a bit, then forced down the flames in his heart. "Are you even a man? Quickly get yourself together, the dead have passed on, you have to cherish the living." Qin Yu Fu stared at the foreman bewilderedly for a while, then patting his legs, he stood up, running towards the morgue. Shu Ning hadn't seen the doctor yet. Actually, Shu Ning was completely fine. He bit the tip of his tongue in the teacher's office so that eldest aunt's reputation would be ruined. If not, when he waited for Qin Yushua to take him away, what if eldest aunt went to the school again to trick people's money using his dropping out of school as a reason? She had all kinds of schemes. Shu Ning had to prevent her from using them. After finishing up the procedures, the foreman contacted a good friend to help buy a casket. At that time, the village favored burial. The rich held a 7-day ceremony while the poor held 3-day ceremonies, inviting over the elderly in the village to have a meal and to cry. That afternoon, the three returned to the village. The house was very messy, all the furniture was gone, even the blankets and clothes were gone. They were originally penniless. The only thing they had of value was the house. Qin Yu Fu's eyes reddened again. Shu Ning sighed. "Let's first go to the neighbor's house to return the money." Qin Yu Fu nodded, walking out. It was tough for such an honest man to borrow money to settle a debt. Shu Ning quickly tidied up the place, letting the foreman sit down. "Thank you for the help today." "Don't mention it, child. May I know why you helped uncle?" Shu Ning could also be regarded as being experienced in the ways of the world. It couldn't be helped that he was blind in his previous life, but in this life he had to be more cautious. In order to leave the man a good impression of him, Shu Ning tilted his head, looking just like a curious child. "I was the one who took him out of this village." The foreman was finally able to smoke, squinting his eyes comfortably. "Xiao Fu is honest and doesn't overstep his bounds. I also never thought that his elder sister would take all his salary in the name of saving up for a wife." "You seem to have something you want to say to me, say it." "Today my eldest aunt forced me, wanting the house deed, causing me to become suspicious. If I didn't check, I wouldn't know, but once I checked, my heart broke. Maternal grandmother left desolately, eldest and second aunt will definitely fight for the house. Once uncle's heart softens, I'm worried that the same thing will happen again. You also want to sell the house." The man's gaze became thoughtful. What innocent child, could it be that this child also was a wolf? Xu Ning looked him in the face without shrinking back, broadly and levelly. It should be enough to buy a bungalow in a remote area. When maternal grandmother was alive, her last regret was that uncle still hadn't gotten himself a wife. The foreman's eyes lit up, finding it feasible. I understand your idea, leave the sale of the house to me. There was a racket outside, eldest and second aunt came really fast. Shouting in such a loud voice, as if wanting to let everyone know that they had been wronged. Hermit's notes. Xiao Fu/Xiao Ning. Xiao equals little, is added to the front of someone's name, usually used as a nickname. There were quite a few idioms in Chinese that wouldn't have made any sense if translated into English, thus I've translated what the author was trying to convey. Hope the chapter still flows well, if not, leave me a comment on what I could improve on. Chapter 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Rebirth. WLSB Chapter 4 TL. Hermit Editor. Hermit TLC. Hermit School has started, and the amount of studying I'll have to do is scaring me already. Thus, this chapter will most likely be the last chapter I'm translating. Don't forget, this was a teaser project. I'm hoping for someone to please pick this project up full time, but if no one does, I may or may not translate another chapter here and there if I have free time. Hope you've all enjoyed these 4 chapters so far. Chapter 4. Retaliation. There was a loud ruckus outside. Second and eldest aunt came really quickly, such loud voices, as if wishing to let everyone know of their grievances. As the 4th child, Qin Yu Fu was the youngest of the family, and the only male. Thus ever since they were young, the parents always wanted the 3 older sisters to yield to the younger brother, he was the pillar of the family. Once they grew up and married into another family, their maternal home's brother was their iron spine. The 3 sisters listened to their parents at first, treating their younger brother nicely, letting him have anything good, but afterwards, as they grew older, the sisters felt that something wasn't right. Why did they have to give way to him? They did all the household chores, they fed the chickens, ducks, geese and even the pigs. How could this Qin Yu Fu reap what he did not sow? However, if they thought about it from another angle, Qin Yu Fu started helping out around the house as soon as he was sensible enough to do so. After his 3 sisters were married, he would have to do all the chores himself, there was no who owed who. It got even noisier outside, as if there were many crying sounds mixing together outside. The foreman ran out immediately, while Xu Ning quietly and calmly tidied up the house, leaving the battlefield to uncle. Hopefully, he would be enlightened to the true characters of his sisters. There were a lot of neighbors standing in a circle to watch, their gazes lukewarm, pointing and gesticulating. Eldest aunt sat on the floor crying and cursing. Since second aunt's husband was a teacher, she at least had a little character. She asked questions loudly, kept saying that the younger brother was not filial, never coming home. Now that their mother needed to undergo surgery, they could only sell the house. Qin Yu Fu didn't say a word, his head hanging, as if really feeling that he had been wrong. Some of the neighbors were also bewildered, was there actually such a thing? But that's wrong, this family's 2 eldest daughters were quite difficult to deal with, they weren't good people. The youngest daughter had left for 10 years with no contact. In fact it was the youngest male who was obedient and thoughtful, very filial. How could it be that he would stay unconcerned even when he heard that his elderly mother was ill and bedridden? Qin Yuji wiped her tears, and couldn't help but laugh secretly. Qin Yulan also raised the corners of her mouth in satisfaction. The pair of sisters thought to themselves that since Qin Yu Fu had been stupid and cowardly since young, it would be easy to send him away with just a few words, just nice, they could split the money half. And as for how to bury their elderly mother, they had really never thought about it. It was at this moment that the crowd parted, an old man slowly walked over with both hands behind his back, it was the village chief. What happened for it to be so noisy here? Both women didn't speak, instead, Qin Yu Fu who had been silent all the while lifted his head, inviting the village chief to be the witness. The village chief raised his eyebrows. Speak. Qin Yulan wanted to speak, but was stopped by Qin Yuji. Even if they couldn't find the housing deed today, if the village chief stepped in and replaced the housing deed, then they could sell the house. The foreman stood next to Qin Yufu, patting the honest man on the shoulder. At this moment, Qin Yufu seemed as if he had been immersed in a jar of pickles, feeling incomparable pain. Eldest sister and second sister, is mother waiting for money to undergo surgery? Yes. After Qin Yulan finished saying this, she eyed eldest sister. Why wasn't she saying anything? Suddenly, she felt some unease. Ever since they were young, eldest sister had been crafty. If anything went wrong, eldest sister would use her as a scapegoat. Could it be? The foreman fished out his phone. After pressing a series of numbers, he passed it to the village chief. Anyone who could become the village chief was not simple. Even under the weight of the stares of the crowd, he remained unperturbed. After the call connected, the party stated that it was the O hospital. The elderly village chief's heart already had some suspicions. After asking a few questions, that old face underwent a great change in a split second, staring at the pair of sisters, shocked. They were truly too undisciplined and out of control. Just where had they misplaced their humanity and morality? With the village chief to bear witness, it would be easy to manage the situation. Once everyone knew that this elderly neighbor was dead, naturally they immediately hurled abuse and berated the pair of sisters for being scoundrels, causing them to be unable to lift their heads. The few elderly ladies who had been closer to maternal grandmother were especially harsh, cursing them repeatedly, hoping that they wouldn't die a good death. A dog could even jump a wall when it was cornered. Qin Yulan was so scared that she wept endlessly. Instead, it was Qin Yuji who immediately had yet another plan. Everyone, don't be noisy, listen to me. My mother is dead, but it was true that she needed to undergo surgery before this. Qin Yufu not doing his filial duty before the sickbed is also the truth. Truly, us two sisters have taken care of our sickly mother till she left this world. Qin Yulan thought of the combat plan she had thought out with her sister beforehand, and her eyes lit up. That's right, our elderly mother only had this one son, she didn't even get to see him before she died, and so she was extremely grieved, saying that she would leave the house to us two sisters, and cannot let Qin Yufu this child that was picked up off lightly. Picked up. Heavens! For the sake of money, even throwing away their face, what relatives! They truly had no sense of shame. The foreman snorted disdainfully. Relatives or not has nothing to do with it, as long as he's on the household register, he's the elderly son in the eyes of the law. At this moment, Shu Ning came out, holding on to the household register, laughing in his heart. These two idiots, their ability to cut off their own path of retreat was the best. This was good, there was no need to take a lot of trouble to persuade uncle to cut all ties with them. The village chief flipped through the household register page by page, nodding his head. The household register has Qin Yufu's name. Since they've already come to this stage, how could Qin Yulan give up just like this? With her red face and thick neck, she argued noisily. Could it be that the words elderly mother said just before she died are considered invalid? The foreman frowned. If this pair of sisters bribed a few of the nurses to act as their witness, then this case would not be resolved smoothly. Qin Yufu was someone even more stupid. Even after thinking so long, he couldn't think of any ideas, his whole face going white. Especially that sentence about being picked up, nearly destroying him. The surroundings began becoming explosive again. While people in the city wrote wills, villagers delivered them verbally or wrote on slips of paper. Oh! Shu Ning laughed coldly, his gaze incomparably sharp. I didn't know that you were both so filial. There's this thing that's called a monitoring device. There are surveillance cameras set up throughout all the hospital's doorways and corridors. Please tell everyone, how did you evade the monitoring devices to enter the ward? Could it be that you were dreaming in broad daylight? Once these words were spoken, everyone started smiling one by one. The pair of sisters' faces became extremely unsightly in an instant, wishing that they could dig a hole and hide in the ground. Now, there was no way to flip the tables, their reputation was soiled. similar to a stray rat on the street being taught a lesson by everyone, giving Xu Ning a malicious glare before making their getaway, as if to say, you just wait. After the farce was over, the funeral arrangements were set up over 7 days. In that period, Qin Yuji came back with a thicker skin, kneeling down to bawl loudly, as if it were real. She then pretended to faint, going into the house to rest, but actually hadn't given up yet, looking everywhere for the housing deed. After ending up empty-handed, she even went through her younger brother's pants and coat, taking off with $20. Xu Ning was guarded against her. After seeing that Qin Yuji had gone into the house for 5 minutes, he purposely called for the tall and strong Aunt Zhang to go and take a look. Even after Qin Yuji's plot was exposed and she was caught red-handed, she still did not repent, trying to turn the tables. Aunt Zhang was incomparably honest and her reputation was good. Pa pa pa. After she gave a few slaps, Qin Yuji was ashamed and unable to show her face, and did not appear again. The second child's husband was a teacher, and had to keep his reputation clean, so Qin Yulan had no choice but to come, being forced to be busy both inside and outside. Even at night, she had to keep watch over the black and white photographs. Seeing her elderly mother's kindly smiling face, she felt extremely scared, feeling that looking at anything caused her to panic and feel terrified. Her face was constantly pale and wan, she was constantly frightened. Qin Yulan's heart was definitely unable to be peaceful. As long as she felt unwell, Xu Ning would be reassured. In the day, he was impolite to her, getting her to do this and that purposely in front on others, causing her to be extremely depressed, her gaze full of hate, but she had to do as instructed, really enjoyable. On the day of the burial, it was drizzling. Qin Yulan couldn't use the umbrella, having no choice but to kneel. After getting hope, she fell sick, experiencing many nightmares in her sleep. The foreman's ability to handle affairs was very high. He had already found a reliable person to buy the house. Xu Ning participated from the beginning to end, selling the house for $5,000. The houses in the village were not worth a lot of money, and it was even an old house that had been occupied for more than 10 years. Actually, there weren't many houses in the city more than 2 stories high, a majority were single-leveled bungalows. Xu Ning made a few calculations, because in a month, Qin Yushuo would come to find him. Buying a house required the foreman's help. Qin Yufu was unwilling, wanting to leave the money for Xu Ning, especially since this money was brought back by third sister during that time. He couldn't take it. The foreman tried to persuade Qin Yufu, even doing so for 2 days didn't work. In the end it was Xu Ning who took the deed and visited the construction site. Once the foreman saw this, he knew it was genuine, and attached more importance to this child. Xu Ning had a brilliant smile on his face. "Uncle, do you want to go out with us to eat lunch?" The foreman could tell with one glance that these two definitely had things to say to one another, so he waved a hand. Taking his safety helmet, he went off. There were countless small restaurants outside the construction site. Xu Ning ordered a plate of spare ribs, a plate of sweet and sour pork, and egg drop soup. These were all dishes that Uncle liked but were reluctant to eat. Uncle put on a forced smile. "If the house has been bought, let it be. Actually, I can just keep staying at the construction site, there's no need for a house. But you, on the other hand, you didn't think about your school fees. Forget it. After we finish eating, let's go get a bankbook for you. In the future, I'll pay your school fees." Xu Ning looked at him being cheerless. Could it be that he still hadn't gotten over it? With a bit of worry. "There's no doubt that you're my biological uncle. They said all that because they wanted to get the house. Uncle, they caused maternal grandmother's death and humiliated us. Do you still have affection for them?" Qin Yufu was silent. The slice of sweet and sour pork he had picked up was put back down. Xu Ning sighed, as expected, thus he gave a dose of harsh reality. "Have you gotten back any of the wages you've sent to eldest aunt over all these years? What's gone can never come back, it's gone forever." Qin Yufu's complexion became gloomy as his whole body jolted, the corners of his eyes becoming moist. In the past, They weren't like this. I still remember when we were small, when it rained, the umbrellas at home were all taken. Eldest sister would go to school to fetch me, using a large piece of plastic to cover my body, yet she herself was wet from head to toe. Second sister liked to tease me and make me laugh. Once I laughed she would be happy. Third sister. Babbling on non-stop, these were all the most beautiful memories, but it was a pity that things remained the same but people changed. There was no going back to those happy days. Xu Ning did not speak, listening silently. By the time Qin Yufu finished saying all these, the dishes had all become cold. Such a big man even shed tears, but seeing that the air around him had become lighter, he had most likely accepted the situation. After this, the two went to the bank to make 2 bankbooks. Xu Ning, who was only 13, had no identity card, making it inconvenient to handle the matter. Before, the matter of buying the house had been done by proxy while using uncle's identity card. Xiao Ning, uncle lives with more than 10 workmates, it's not good to keep precious items here, why don't you keep the housing deed in the school? Alright, the house that Xu Ning had bought was naturally not for people to stay in, but was for immediate relocation. It could earn a lot. Uncle, keep our assets a secret, do not mention whatever happened today to anyone. If eldest and second aunt want your wages and come to the construction site to make trouble, just say that you borrowed a lot of money to make the funeral arrangements, let they pay back the money. Qin Yufu laughed at this, knocking on Xu Ning's little head. You're smart. After separating, Xu Ning went to the trading hall to open an account and look at stocks, keeping only a few tens out of the 1,000 he had. He deposited everything into the account. After returning back to the school, Xu Ning found that everyone, including the teachers, were looking at him with pity in their gazes. After asking, then did he know that this was the class monitor's masterpiece of an effort at publicizing his situation. Not bad, truly a close friend. With this, all the villages in the area would know of their wicked conduct. In an instant, a month passed like this. Today, there was an unusually fashionable car parked outside the school. Hermit's Notes. Chapter title. Direct translation is, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But it was too long, so I shortened it to retaliation. Translated as iron spine, but essentially the person the sisters will rely on when they marry into another family. Not sure how to translate, so I used character. Similar words I thought of include class, quality. As if he had been immersed in a jar of pickles, I translated it as I saw it, because searching around didn't yield any results for recent slang etc. I'm thinking this refers to sour feeling, because pickles are sour. A dog could even jump a wall when it was cornered. Literal translation, spare ribs, short form for spare rib dishes. This dish is slightly different, using pork slices instead of small chunks. Direct translation is to take the money back, but that doesn't quite fit the situation. Chapter 5. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The current day of the previous life was an important day. Qin Yuzhua had come to the school to see Xu Ning. Xu Ning, who was sitting in the classroom, stared peacefully at the blackboard, turning the pen in his hand. His mind wandered off. The class teacher knocked on the door, and the English teacher lifted her glasses to take a better look, and opened the door to ask right away. The class teacher spoke a few words with her before waving towards Xu Ning. Based on how vigorous the teacher looked, she must be very happy. I guess, a homeless child who had no parents and had also lost his grandmother to death, for his mother to suddenly come calling, who wouldn't be happy? The class teacher brought Xu Ning to the director's office. Xu Ning stood honestly. The school transfer procedures has already been completed. The director was speaking cheerfully with a very beautiful lady. This woman, who did not have the air of a country bumpkin at all, is Qin Yuzhua. She could be considered unusual. She didn't look like anyone else. Beautiful, with an elegant temperament, the long floral dress fitted to her perfect body made her look even more gentle and generous. Her decent way of speech made her seem like a well-bred girl, and not just a pretty girl from a humble family. Is this person really Xu Ning's birth mother? The class teacher frowned subconsciously. She wasn't trying to adopt him, was she? This woman looks quite bright and beautiful. She definitely came from a big city. not someone they from the tier 4 cities can be compared to. She then took a look at Xu Ning. He looked like a withering bean sprout, thin and shriveled, with dull hair, wearing faded clothes. Xu Ning lightly greeted a word of uncle, and only then was the class teacher relieved. There was a laborer standing at the corner. He had seemingly just left from work, his shoes were covered in mud. After their greetings, Qin Yushua held the procedure papers, and curved down her waist with tearful eyes. Her hands hesitated, as if afraid of frightening the child. Before she even hugged him she spoke. I am your mother. Her voice was very quiet. Those who did not understand the situation would definitely think that Qin Yushua was feeling so emotional that she could not control herself. Xu Ning raised his brows, and took a look at the beautiful woman dazedly. He observed her immodestly. A sense of unhappiness flashed past Qin Yushua's eyes, and raised a sweet smile. Her real intentions were revealed. Under normal circumstances, she would probably be ashamed and regretful after seeing the son that she had abandoned for more than 10 years. But she was the executive assistant of a CEO after all, and was very knowledgeable, yet heartless. Naturally she would not be afraid to face him. Qin Yushua's appearance and temperament were actually not that outstanding. It just depends on who she's being compared to. At her dad's company she was practically transparent, hardworking, responsible. She had just settled down securely in the executive assistant position for 15 years. Her ability to cope with situations is not uncommon in the city. Xiao Ning. Qin Yushua spread her arms out, watching in anticipation. The Xu Ning of today is not the same as the foolish one from before. Believing anything he's told, he took 2 steps back doubtfully. Didn't my mother die? The mask on Qin Yushua's face faintly cracked, and she immediately held her mouth and cried. She gazed towards the garbage like Qin Yu Fu as if asking for help. If not for the fact that she needed him to be a witness, why else would Qin Yushua lower her status to stay in the same room as him? Qin Yu Fu gave Xu Ning's shoulder a pat, and sighed. She's your mother. Third sister. Also had her difficulties. In those years she would have casual sex after getting drunk, and she was so afraid after getting pregnant before marriage that she did not take her own life after she thought of you. Xiao Ning, you are still young, you don't understand the problems of adults. Don't blame third sister. Xu Ning gave a snort of contempt. Do you want me to thank her as well? How could these words be said in front of outsiders? They say mud does not help to hold the wall. That is very true. The implicating words from earlier are all wasted. Qin Yushua was furious, yet she did lash out. She wanted to pull Xu Ning's hand, but didn't expect for him to evade her again. It seems that it may require some effort for her to curry favor with him. The class teacher quickly smoothed things over. Are you still attending class today? Qin Yushua pretended to force a smile. Her finger lightly dabbed the bottom of her eye, wiping away the tears. No, I'd like to bring Xu Ning out to find a good place to talk. There's a knot in this child's heart. The earlier we can unravel it, the earlier we can live a good life together. Qin Yu Fu took the lead and walked out. Xu Ning said his goodbyes to the class teacher and the other teachers, and left. In a cafe, Qin Yu Fu had only took 1 sip of coffee before his face scrunched up in bitterness, and ordered a cup of water. The look of a poor person, how shameful. Qin Yushua shook her head. She looked towards Xu Ning and curled the corners of her mouth, smiling sweetly. Don't take your uncle's words to heart. Even if your mother is alone, no matter how hard it is, I will never abandon you. Before, your mother had no house, no savings, and I could only feel relieved putting you in the hold house. You've also grown up now, and you've wizened up. You can understand mother's hardships, right? Qin Yushua saw Xu Ning lightly furrow his brows, and knew she had some hope. She spared a few glances to Qin Yu Fu, but that man only cared to drink water. Qin Yushua gave him kick, albeit a really light one, because this baggage had been dumb since young. How should she explain if on the off chance he asked why she kicked him? Today was the first time meeting Xu Ning. She could not afford to leave a bad impression. Qin Yu Fu gave a few coughs. Xiao Ning, you should go with your mother. Qin Yushua had also striked while the iron was hot. Her teary eyes sparkled. Xiao Ning, let's not be separated anymore, okay? Xu Ning couldn't not return. Xu Cheng had already known about the existence of such a son, and naturally wouldn't let him go free again. But to just agree so foolishly, it made him grieve. He had to make some trouble or else his life would be in vain, right? Qin Yushua's face had already filled with tears. She choked. Xiao Ning, forgive mother, will you? For you, I'm willing to find your real father for a talk, give you a warm home, with your mother and father, and even a little brother to accompany you in the future. How about it? Sounds like a great idea, but the prerequisite is to kill off Dad's eldest son, right? You had not even seen what kind of person Xu Heng was. Your head is so smart that it's not human at all. Sometimes Xu Ning would think in frustration, whether or not he was actually the reincarnation of a millennium bastard. Since now that Xu Ning had in fact been reborn, maybe other people were evil too, right? He's no match for them. He'd be better off honestly holding on to his early wisdom, to make a fortune, and happily become a rich playboy, buy a sports car, drink expensive alcohol, and find a man to pass the days, never stepping foot in the office, and let big brother Xu Heng relax. O.org. Xiao Ning. Xiao Ning, why are you not talking? Qin Yushua's face is really looking bad. Could it be that this child was dumb like the little brother? He would be of no use then, might as well kept everything from him till the end. She subconsciously rubbed her stomach. In here, there was already a small life. If they did not grow up by her side, then they were not considered related, wouldn't even spare me a glance. Qin Yushua glared at Qin Yufu. Qin Yufu swallowed his saliva, thinking about the words third sister had said in front of the construction site. Now for Xu Ning to be alone naturally wouldn't do. An adolescent requires the love of his parents. Qin Yufu had also felt that third sister's words made sense. Those days third sister were actually quite pitiful. That man did not know of Xiao Ning's existence, because having casual sex after getting drunk was too absurd. How could the man's family be destroyed? The folks in the countryside are simple and honest, so they felt that Qin Yushua's actions are right, just that they do not agree with her choice to bear the child. An unmarried bringing a child along with her will destroy her future. But third sister still gave birth to Xu Ning. Qin Yufu felt that third sister is very brave, and his eyes reddened. Xiao Ning, your mother's heart has already been broken because of what happened to your grandmother. You should comfort her well. Xu Ning sneered in his heart. He could follow the pole up just as he needed. Before you go, you should go pray to your grandmother. Qin Yushua's hand that was holding the coffee cup paused for a moment, feeling slightly uncomfortable. By now this case should have been settled. That day when she returned to the village, Qin Yushua wore a pair of high heels. The mountain roads were rugged. With a step and a stumble she reached the gravestone and knelt down, offering 3 bows, and gave a good cry. You have to go all the way if you're gonna start a play. It looked just like it was real. Xu Ning narrowed his eyes. His ears were filled with his uncle's persuasions. What third sister did not have it easy? Just a woman going to work in the morning and studying at night, working hard to earn a qualification certificate. She could not handle a child at all. It's not that she didn't love you. If not, she wouldn't borrow money to build a house, afraid of Xu Ning bearing hardships and whatnot. Saying everything reasonably that it does not fit uncle's IQ at all. She taught you how to say all this. His uncle's mouth pursed. Your mother wants you to live well, Xiao Ning, be good, live out your days well with third sister. If she really meant well, she wouldn't not give me even a single call. She abandoned me for over 10 years, she had already abandoned her loved ones early on. Xu Ning saw that his uncle wanted to refute, and said quickly. She contacted you today because I've never seen her before. You were a suitable choice for a mediator. Think about eldest aunt and second aunt's mouths. What could they help her with? Only you were honest and gullible. His uncle was silent, and lowered his head. Xu Ning did not want him to feel bad either, but some words has to be said or he would never find out. The skirt she wore would cost at least 30,000, diamond necklace 170,000, and do you know how much her car costs? 3,800,000. Qin Yufu sucked in a breath. He was almost shocked to death. Don't talk blindly about things you've never come in contact to before. Simply taking some money from Qin Yushua would be enough for grandmother to have fish and meat, and live the rest of her life comfortably. Why was she left to die in the hospital? Uncle, is it that you don't believe anything I say at all? Take note of the car model and go back to ask the foreman. This is the phone I bought using the money left over from buying the house. You hold on to it. After I leave I'll call you often. Oh, and, she mentioned my real father just now. I reckon the two are already together, otherwise she would not have any thoughts to pick me up. You can rest assured, I'm good and I'll be obedient. Qin Yu Fu couldn't resist hugging Shu Ning's thin little body, and sighed continuously. The mobile phone in his hand is quite simple, yet it was heavier than a daughter. His voice immediately became hoarse. Xiao Ning, if you aren't living happily then come back, uncle will raise you. Shu Ning held both his hands up, and tightly hugged his uncle's waist. Qin Yushua cried for a good moment and stood up. Her legs were so weak she nearly fell over. She was frightened till her face was pale as she held her stomach. If he were to find out her effort of acting, if Shu Ning were to seize Qin Yu Fu, would she regret it? Qin Yu Fu frowned, his heart felt flooded. He started to notice third sister's every move. He felt that third sister was not like Shu Ning described. From time to time she would take note of her own words, gentle and sweet, just like when they were young. But Qin Yu Fu was not stupid. From start to end third sister had maintained considerable distance between them. There was no contact at all. And she did not even give him her number. The Qin Yushua of the previous life had not kowtowed to grandma. Shu Ning got in the car and left the village, bringing nothing with him. Qin Yushua will buy new ones for him. The air definitely must not go awkward. Qin Yushua had nothing to say, but she tried to find some topics, like a mother carefully currying the favor of her child. To be able to bring home the target successfully, is she happy about it? Could Shu Ning say these words to her? Why did you not contact me all these years? Notes. Tier 4 city. China's cities are categorized into tiers based on their infrastructural and urban development, similar to first world versus third world countries. Tier 1 is the highest and Tier 4 is the lowest. Mud does not help hold the wall. Calling someone hopeless wouldn't let him go free again. This one sounded a bit aggressive, but the word is Fang Yang. It means to free a captive pet to the wilds. Heavier than a daughter. Okay, as for why a phone is heavier than a daughter, he is either talking about his unwillingness to let Shu Ning go, or he is saying that the phone is simple but weighs as much as gold. I've never seen anyone refer to gold as Qian Jin. I've only seen it used as daughter or someone's precious daughter. Same thing, lol. Chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Granny's house is very poor. Even a normal landline is not available, let alone a mobile phone. Use what to contact. It's quite weird for a poor kid who had never even come in contact with a phone to talk about contacting. Under normal circumstances he shouldn't ask why she didn't go and find him, or why she never wrote a letter, didn't have any relatives pass on a message and so on. Shu Ning had never been a considerate person. At most he was smart in petty ways. He calmly glanced over to Qin Yushua. Fortunately she didn't notice, or not, she would only ignore him if there was contempt. She is not a simple person at all. He huffed a breath of air. Shu Ning felt that after his rebirth he had been too complacent, he was almost exposed. Yet Qin Yushua's heart was not calm. Thinking back on the events of those years made her chest feel stuffy and uncomfortable. I'm the executive assistant of your father. One day your dad had gotten drunk with me, and accidentally had you. At that time, your father's wife is still alive. She had the right to be arrogant and bossy. I was afraid of her finding out, so I beared with it and didn't care return home. I didn't dare to contact you guys. The real reason was that she was afraid of Shu Qing finding out. At that time the two of them had no feelings with each other. Shu Ning nodded. It's been hard on you, being such a whore, and you still want to pretend you're chaste. Hypocritical. Might as well turn his head away and sleep, lest he contaminate his ears with her talking. Actually on that year, Qin Yushua had just managed to seize the opportunity with some difficulty, and got pregnant. She had wanted to marry into wealth, but how could she have known that that rich woman who had gotten cancer could live a few more years, keeping her from marrying in? Qin Yushua gritted her teeth in anger. She cursed her every day. And what could she do when other people had such a good lineage? How would the Qin Yuhua with no supporters dare to go up and cause trouble? Might as well secretly take down Shu Cheng, dripping water can wear down stone, she had confidence. Those noble ladies are arrogant and impatient, how could they be as gentle and sensible as her? In those 10 years she had gotten involved with several drunken chairmen, but she did not hit jackpot, but she finally got pregnant this year. After Shu Cheng found out, he was in a difficult position, she was after all the competent helper by his side, it has been about 15 years hasn't it? Since they had met regularly there would more or less still be a bit of feelings between them, he couldn't bear to be ruthless, and was afraid of his eldest son getting angry if he found out. In the end he still decided to let Qin Yuhua get an abortion, gave her a check worth 5 million as well as a villa for compensation. Qin Yuhua had been planning meticulously for so many years, how could there be no backup trick? Then Shu Cheng had found out the existence of Shu Ning by accident. Even if Shu Cheng was drunk he's still an impression, just that if she had not mentioned it then he naturally would not mention it either, and pretend that it had never happened. But now that he thought about it they couldn't have been soul mates, could they? And what's more Qin Yuhua liked to keep herself pure, and had never gotten a boyfriend. The Shu Cheng who had been single all along suddenly felt touched. Qin Yuhua was smart and knew her place, she had no greedy thoughts at all, gentle like clothes that were most intimate. Qin Yuhua whose plan was successful then married Shu Cheng. Shu Ning grew up in the countryside, he was definitely a feral child with no family education, whereas the eldest son Shu Heng while young, was wise and alert, his temperament was even more incomparable, if Shu Cheng were to see the slovenly Shu Ning. Qin Yuhua did not even dare to think about it. That's why she proposed the idea of bringing Shu Ning back slowly, because Shu Ning had been left there since he is young. What if it made Shu Heng unhappy? After all that year when Qin Yuhua got pregnant, that person's previous wife had not died yet, no matter how she thought about it Shu Heng would not like Shu Ning, let alone living together and enjoying the happiness of families. Although Shu Cheng really wanted to see Shu Ning, but once he thought about his son's mood, he quickly gave up. The car had been running for a long time, and parked in the courtyard of a villa in Sea City. Shu Ning woke up leisurely, gave his eyes a rub, and looked towards the familiar place with narrowed eyes. Looks beautiful doesn't it? Our future house will be even more beautiful, you need to get used to it soon, you look surprised like that I will find several teachers for you, try to give your father a good impression, don't worry, he will be very happy to know of your existence. Shu Ning smiled a bit, looking quite cute. Qin Yuhua finally sighed a breath of relief, that's right, for a mother who had not appeared for more than 10 years to suddenly come looking for him, he was probably resentful but happy, that is understandable. Shu Ning is still young, but once he's experienced the life of the rich, he would naturally try to curry favor with me. Qin Yuhua curled the edge of her mouth as she got off the car, feeling extremely confident. Today has been too exhausting, first take a nap, let the nanny clean up Shu Ning, take him out for a packaging, then act out a tragedy, eat a big meal at night, then she can keep Shu Ning under her control. The nanny heard the noise and came out to greet them. Shu Ning got off the car, just a quick introduction and they were considered acquaintanced. Following Qin Yuhua he entered the villa, changed his shoes, familiarizing himself with the environment. Qin Yuhua pulled Shu Ning up to the second floor while talking, pushed open the door to best room. Do you like it? I like it a lot, who doesn't know how to fake? Then I can rest assured, Qin Yuhua considerately opened the quilt. Lay down and sleep for a while, at night mother will bring you out to eat. Okay. With a sigh, Qin Yuhua was about to speak but stopped, a bit sad, hesitated for a bit and then spoke. You take a rest. This child is so unenthusiastic, depressing. Qin Yuhua had lost her mood to sleep. The nanny knocked on the door, after receiving permission she came in with a face full of smiles holding some juice. Young master, would you like to take a bath? But I don't know where the bathhouse is. He received the glass and took a sip. Freshly squeezed fruit juice really is delicious. When Shu Ning was young he was just a silly little child, his acting now did not even require any effort. The nanny is a rather nice person, a heartbroken emotion flashed past. Young master, wait here, I will go and prepare the hot water. There is a bathroom right in the room. The bathtub inside was naturally very good as well. Qin Yushuo wanted to open Xu Ning's eyes to the world, so she had spent quite a fair bit of money. Currently the closet was filled with many brand-name clothes, and the drawer was filled with various gadgets. She had even bought more than 20 pairs of shoes. She had to be sure that Xu Ning would fall over in love, and work hard for this luxurious life. The water was soon ready. While Xu Ning walked in, he immediately closed the door. What kind of joke is this? In his last life he had foolishly let the nanny wash him. It was awkward for days, almost left a trauma in his heart. The nanny paused for a moment and knocked on the door. Young master, how about you let me help you? Oh heavens, does he know how to use it? Please don't get scalded. Xu Ning replied loudly. I can wash myself, turn on the shower. Hualala, pretending to not hear. The nanny could only give up. Xu Ning had only come out half an hour later. Bathing sure is comfortable. He stretched his waist, and his bathrobe was loose. The nanny was waiting right in his room, as expected by Xu Ning. She had already prepared his clothes. Seeing Xu Ning's ruddy face, he's probably fine. Then she turned around and left. Xu Ning sluggishly dressed himself. Auntie, do you still have anything to do? Bring me out for a wash, cut, and blow, haha. The nanny chuckled. When I went out earlier I noticed that the miss has already fallen asleep. She had probably gotten tired after driving for so many hours. I can see that, young master, your hair is a bit long. How about we go out for a cut? Give her a good surprise. Since this was an old trick, Xu Ning naturally happily agreed. They went to the best hairdressing salon, and the nanny picked out a celebrity cut. Xu Ning rolled his eyes and made his own choice. Actually, men's hair is fine as long as it's fresh, comfortable, and easy on the eyes. After all, he had come back after being rebirthed, so his insight was uncommon. The hairstyles popular in this age can't be looked at all. The hairstylist is very good. After he was done cutting Xu Ning's hair according to his wishes, he himself had been shocked by the glamour. He wanted to take a picture to solicit customers, but was rejected by Xu Ning. The store had coughed up blood and offered 10,000 bucks. Only then did Xu Ning agree to have his picture pasted on the wall, and it was only one photo. The nanny stared blankly. She'd gone stupid. Only after they left the hair salon did the nanny respond, but she was a nanny after all. She understood the basic rules. Young master, that place in front is the noble residence that Miss frequents. Do you want to take a look? Miss has a yearly membership, but she had been too busy, so she never got the chance to go. It's quite a waste. The excuse is too bad. Xu Ning pouted. Even his good culture was about to leak out. Okay. Aren't you just bringing me there for a facelift? Currently his skin is indeed not good, yellow, no nourishment. The date that Qin Yushuo had planned with Xu Cheng was a month later. Naturally she had to race against time to package up Xu Ning into a clever, sensible, and well-mannered prince. In his previous life Qin Yushuo was completely speechless after she had woken up. She sat in bed for 10 seconds and only then did she put on a smiling face. She didn't think, not even in her dreams, that the nanny would be so brainless, and gave Xu Ning the feminine care. The quality of hospitality in the noble residence was exceptionally high. The customers here are all rich, and if they aren't they have backers. They nodded their heads and bowed, giving people a feeling of home away from home. The nanny took out the card and passed it over, and communicated with the front desk. Two little ladies felt very embarrassed. They stole a few glances at Xu Ning, secretly thinking, could it be that someone was trying to embarrass him? No good. The boy was dressed excellently, a full body of brand names, well postured and a steady gaze. With one look you could tell how well cultured he was, probably born with an extraordinary status. He's not one they can offend, so they shook their heads at the nanny and refused. Xu Ning watched the scene in his eyes, secretly thinking that something feels strange. In the last life they had quickly agreed. The Xu Ning of the last life turned his head everywhere, secretly observing everything, lowering his head, his gaze flickering, thinking that other people didn't notice. If not for his nanny bringing him, he would definitely be reported to the police under suspicion of being a petty thief. The nanny's forehead was quickly filled with sweat. The things ordered by the miss has to be done. Xu Ning didn't want to be unlucky and stepped 2 steps forward. Go on with the process, write it down on the card. All right. 2 beautiful little ladies were instantly filled with smiles, like 2 sunflowers. It's done just like that. The nanny was dumbfounded again. The bartender, the male receptionist, raised his hand, and led the way in front. Xu Ning walked leisurely. The nanny blinked her eyes, and scratched her head. How should she explain herself to the miss when they return? Qin Yuzhua tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. Her head was very painful. She changed her clothes. She put the photo that she had prepared before on the bed. The bell was pressed. The nanny led Xu Ning through the door. Oh heavens, this is my son. He had been reborn. Xu Ning looked exceptionally fresh, and his complexion had improved a lot. Just too skinny and too short. No matter, it'll be fine if he drinks more milk and does more exercises. These are Xu Cheng's genes after all, they won't be bad. The expression in Qin Yuzhua's eyes are extremely bright. She stood up from the side of the bed, and walked to Xu Ning's side and pulled his hand, and went back to the bed together to sit down. Xu Ning saw the photo, and his eyes narrowed. His gaze was slightly complex. This time he did not act. Qin Yuzhua made an O sound, and took a photo to her hands and touched it. The corners have already faded. They always say women are always met. In fact, these traces are all fake. If you really cared about it, naturally you would hang it up, and keep it well. How could you allow the photo to become old and yellow? Notes. Gentle like clothes that were most intimate. The word intimate here is the word Tai Xin, stick, heart. It is used to describe a person who makes one feel good, like a sweet or kind person. She's not a super hot pair of bikini women are always met. I assume they are talking about how nice women always meet bad men, because that's the closest idiom I can think of with these few words to go with. Chapter 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qin Yuzhua made an O sound, and took a photo to her hands and touched it. The corners have already faded. They always say women are always met. In fact, these traces are all fake. If you really cared about it, naturally you would hang it up, and keep it well. How could you allow the photo to become old and yellow? These that were taken not long after you were born. That it's a pity I wasn't by your side while you were growing up. I didn't get to go through happiness, anger, sadness, and joy with you. Bada-bada-bada. Qin Yuzhua looked like she was revealing her real intentions, but as for what reason she's crying so hard to the point where her throat was sore, only she knows. But her crying looks quite pleasing to the eye. There was a type of gentleness only present in women, with a pitiable gaze, and without makeup too. No matter how you looked at it, this was planned. Xu Ning listened quietly, hiding his thoughts about watching a monkey show in his heart. When he was young he had only been led by the nose because he had never seen such shamelessness before, so foolish. When Qin Yuzhua was done talking and crying, Xu Ning called out a word of mother, and then the two cuddled together. The nanny at the door covered her mouth, feeling very touched and thankful. Only Xu Ning, who had his head lowered, had a gaze full of coldness. The edge of his mouth curled, his hand subconsciously touched the woman's stomach. In here, Xu Yao is growing up. Once he thought of that brat who looked clever and obedient yet had a heart of poison. Xu Ning almost couldn't resist the urge to knock him out. But if he had really done that, he'd be letting off Xu Yao too easily. Might as well watch him drool over Xu Shi, that big meat pie, yet not able to take a bite. Isn't that more interesting? Qin Yuzhua brought Xu Ning out to have a big meal, her attitude peerlessly passionate, her eyes reddened easily, and liked to reach her hand out to give him a pull and a squeeze, treating Xu Ning as her baby. Xu Ning's heart towards his birth mother has already died, really, so he felt nothing. He would only find it funny if she deliberately did anything. Early the next morning, Qin Yuzhua's teacher troupe has already arrived. One by one they stood in the living room. There were both male and female. They were all outstanding people. A month's time had quickly passed. Etiquette and behavior were still acceptable. After all, a secondary school student's basic English skills are just passable. then there was knowledge, it needed to be strengthened, his skin had also turned white, like a young master, his way of talking. Better talk less when the time comes, as for his height, thin and withered as always. With a well-placed smile, he looked quite obedient. A month's time was too short, Qin Yuxue sighed, a sense of impatience flashed through her eyes, he was not raised by her side after all. Qin Yuxue personally drove and hit the roads bringing Xu Ning, listening to some light music, occasionally explaining a few things, hoping that Xu Ning wouldn't be nervous. Xu Cheng's attitude is extremely important, after all, even if it was just one child, if he was added in then various things would have to be split amongst them. Xu Ning watched the scenery, curved the edge of his mouth, and did not reply. Qin Yuxue was depressed, the problem with Xu Ning not caring about things, she was about to be driven mad. The car stopped in front of a tea house, a very quiet place, only members were allowed in, the attendants inside were dressed in Han Dynasty historical costumes, and had a special artistic prospect. BVEC they had just sat down, and Qin Yushua's phone rang. As soon as she saw the call display she was completely frozen, staying around men for so long, she knew that this call meant he wasn't coming. She felt an immense disappointment and sadness. Fine, they've already married anyway, if the big one can't come, there's still the small one. Originally she thought that even if Xu Ning was of no use, leaving him in the villa to spite Xu Heng was still great, then teach Xu Ning some underhanded tricks. After 1 or 2 times, Xu Cheng would start to lose patience with that eldest son Xu Heng, feeling that he's not caring for his little brother, cruel and vicious, then the future inheritance rights of the company would be left to the child inside her stomach. As for Xu Ning, Qin Yuxue had only wanted to give him the position of a manager. All of the woman's disdainful and inspecting gaze fell on Xu Ning's face. Xu Ning lowered his head, actually he had already saw it about once or twice from the reflection in the mirror. Mom, are you not picking up the phone? You can't pick it up immediately, silly boy. Qin Yuxue picked up the phone and talked to Xu Cheng for about a minute or so. Didn't get to see Dad today, the person they wanted to see was Xu Heng, he looked the same as from his memories in his past life. Dad hoped that Xu Ning and Xu Heng could encounter each other once, leave a good impression then enter the house, call him Qin Yuxue's adoptive son, the matching surname is just a coincidence, they're not in the family register. Xu Cheng's intentions were quite clear, he cared about his eldest son's feelings. Who was Qin Yuxue? Full of schemes, full of patience, she immediately agreed, and even said that it should have been so. Under the same roof, you don't have to worry about the length of time, no matter how favored by the heavens Xu Heng was, maybe one day he would get hit by a car as soon as he went out the door, right? Even if he were long lived, he was still just a high school student. If Qin Yuxue wanted to make him suffer so much he would rather die. She still had some confidence. Xu Cheng felt so moved he was speechless. When he put down his phone, he still thought about the gentle and pretty young lady of humble birth. Qin Yushua's appearance, oh her, she has suffered many hardships for me, and tolerated too much. Xu Ning savored his tea, watching the secretly pleased yet gloomy expression flash past Qin Yushua's face. Baby, mother is going to take you to see your father's eldest son, don't feel anxious and listen to mother. Qin Yuxue talked a bit about the grudge with rich and powerful families, and pointed out how unbearable and disadvantageous business alliances are, talking about Xu Cheng as best as possible, and made Xu Heng and his mother out to be cunning people. Xu Ning, you have to remember, right now your father doesn't know how unbearable his eldest son is, you have to endure it all right. Qin Yuxue was also smart one moment and muddle-headed the next. She kept thinking that Xu Ning was foolish, don't be like Xu Heng, she didn't even notice that he's a good person and made a definite decision about him. In the past life, Xu Ning gritted his teeth hatefully, and stood by the corner staring with his big eyes, with no way to fall to the ground righteously, waiting for the Xu Heng who had been passing by coincidentally to help him back up. Standing at the same place as the last life, one fall leads to endless misery and regret, Xu Ning lamented. Qin Yuxue had already gotten Xu Heng's bodyguard to leave, what comes after is his moment to make a move. Far away, a slim figure slowly walked over. Xu Heng is very handsome, profound features, the sun shone on his hair that was dark like ink, shining a shimmering light. The Shu Heng of today did not exude the same pressure as he did as an adult, but the poker face technique has already been practiced, expressionless, and his gaze was even colder. Qin Yushua had not married Shu Cheng for long, it was normal for him to act like this. Shu Ning's stature is short, standing in front of Shu Heng he inclined his head, and looked up. It seems that those big and round eyes were incomparably resplendent, innocent with no hint of evil. Shu Heng stopped, the bodyguards weren't around, several suspicious characters had appeared on school grounds, a child. Unreasonable _ big brother, can you take me to find my mother? My mother is just outside the west gate at the coffee shop. Shu Ning stretched his hand out, revealing a pitiful look in his eyes. Though I don't know why mother wanted me to do this, maybe she wants to see you. Shu Heng looked steadily at Shu Ning, pulled his small hand, lightly, and walked to the coffee shop. Shu Ning happily sat by Qin Yushua's side, and drank a sip of juice. Mom, I got lost, big brother sent me here. Qin Yushua stood up a bit anxiously, she was at a loss, still holding on to the corner of her skirt. Shao, Shu Heng, thank you, this child that is. Shu Heng turned and left. Leaving just like that. Truly a male god, he's got quite a character. Shu Ning drank his juice while feeling the joy in his heart. Ha 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 ha, she'd been sold out by me and she still doesn't know and still continued acting, so shameful. Feels great. Shu Ning had walked in with Shu Heng while holding hands. Qin Yushua had seen it as well. Her heart was extremely happy, but at the same time a crack appeared in the perfect expression, through the anxious inquiries, as well as Shu Heng's attitude, Shu Ning's feelings. Shu Ning naturally talked about the good sides, if not he would be locked into a dark room like the last life. He had been starved in there for 2 days and 2 nights. Qin Yushua then held the weak Shu Ning and cried loudly, saying that she did this for your own good. She explained the powerful relations in a disappointed and resenting way, and the situation of not being able to make big decisions due to them staying under someone else's roof. New hatred mixed with the old. Shu Ning had put all the responsibility under Shu Heng's head, and gritted his teeth towards him hatefully. Due to that he treated himself with cruelty, being pushed down the stairs, listening to Qin Yushua frame Shu Heng who just so happened to be present. The past is painful. Who should be blamed? Qin Yushua. Wasn't it just that he was stupid? On that afternoon, Qin Yushua sent Shu Ning home, and instructed the nanny to watch him well, then drove to the company while humming to report the good news to Shu Cheng. Nanny's cooking is delicious, color, flavor, and taste are all excellent. The fate of the 2 people were about to come to an end. This nanny had always been taking care of Qin Yushua all along for quite a few years. She's a good person, and did not speak unnecessarily. Shu Ning had went out for a stroll several times while Qin Yushua had been away, and the nanny did not tell on him. It's a shame that she could not be brought into the Shu residence. Young master, why don't you drink some more fish soup? He's eating too less, not like a 13-year-old child. Okay. Fish soup is very nutritious. Shu Ning naturally knew how thoughtful the nanny is. After brushing his teeth, Shu Ning picked up his wallet and walked out. The nanny followed him to the door. The miss is busy, and normally comes home after she's finished dinner. You should come home earlier, young master. At night I will make your favorite red braised pork belly, and bunny-shaped mantou as well. Shu Ning blinked. Okay. The nanny smiled happily. She watched Shu Ning leave, until he couldn't be seen anymore. Only then did she hum an off-tune song as she left holding a shopping basket. In order to let Shu Ning adapt quickly to the wealthy life, he had to spend $10,000 last month, and $20,000 this month. This is the assignment given to him by Qin Yushua. No matter what he bought after he returned, he had to explain his reason of buying the item. Why did you buy this? What can it be used for? Can the quality be improved or can it be kept as a collection and so on? Only in this way taste be cultivated, as well as opening his eyes to the world, turning him into a qualified wealthy young master. Qin Yushua would only be satisfied if the reason is reasonable, if she wasn't satisfied, both dinner and breakfast are gone, and he would be punished to stand as well. Xu Ning didn't come out today to find his taste, rather to play the stocks. If he wanted to live freely, he had to wait until adulthood, if not nobody could take custody of him from Xu Cheng. Xu Ning knows his own fighting strength, but he had never thought of leaving this family. Bearing the second young master name has many benefits. His last life was too full of vexation, this life he had to become a happy silk pants sponger. As long as I'm hugging Xu Heng's thick thighs, who dares to touch me, As soon as he thought of the 20,000 bucks at hand plus the stocks, there was nearly 50,000, Xu Ning couldn't laugh again. He'd rather ride a car back to his old home to continue looking after the house. He copied down a lot of landline numbers, and contacted them back to back, buying whatever he can. When Xu Ning buys an apartment, he can turn over his deposits. The old houses in this area were too broken and old, many of them were empty, some of them collapsed because nobody were living there. They were located at the edge of the city. The residents did not have any notions of relocating to an apartment. Currently apartments costed only about 10,000 or so, and you could often purchase a broken house with just 1,000 or so. Xu Ning specially selected a place with a big courtyard. It had only been 3 days, and the money in his hands were gone again. No matter, in 3 days he could move in with them anyways. When that time comes, Xu Cheng would give him a red envelope worth 50,000. On Thursday morning, Xu Ning wore a little snow-white suit. His hair was well-groomed and slick. He secretly grinned. What should come will still come. Baby, we should get going. The nanny stood teary-eyed next to the stairs, quite reluctant to part with this job. Xu Ning knows Qin Yushua's character. When the need arises, red envelopes will come out continuously. When there's no longer a use, she'll immediately put on a cold face, sweep the floor, and leave. Xu Ning smiled to his nanny. There's still some rubbish in my room, remember to throw it when you leave. Yes, young master. Qin Yushua looked at her watch again and again. Her attitude started to become slightly unpleasant. Let's go. Xu Ning got into the car, and narrowed his eyes. Xu Hengji, we're about to meet again. Oh, ___, oh notes. With no way to fall to the ground righteously, tan dang dang, the word means to do something with clean intentions, nothing hidden within, and or morally right. Example would be a person came out of jail and wishes to become a better person, in that case. In a disappointed and resenting way, hen tai biu ching gang, hate the iron for not turning into steel, to feel hateful about not having one's expectations met. Mantu, a ball of steamed dough, they're really soft and puffy, with a hint of sweetness. Punished to stand, Fa Jean, a common punishment where kids are forced to stand for long hours if they did something bad. Other varieties include pulling your ears and squatting several times, I've seen up to 100, and frog jumps, etc. Shu Hing Ge, Ji means brother, usually, but that's more commonly used by girls or children. Also, I don't know how many of you grew up with Chinese pop, but if I had to suffer this, you have to too. Chapter 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The nanny was in a very poor mood. She couldn't understand why the miss replaced her with someone else to watch the house. Could there be anything she's not satisfied with? If a virtuous can't figure it out, then they won't think about it. Young master said there was rubbish. The nanny is a serious and responsible person. Even if she was fired, she would still finish her last day of work. She immediately went up the stairs to tidy up the room, but where was there rubbish in the bin? But there was a small purse on the small table instead. The nanny went up to take a look. Half an envelope peeked out from under. For me. Thank you for taking care of me for this period of time. I had never eaten such delicious red braised pork belly before. The items in the purse are my regards. There is an address on the invoice. You can return it. The nanny wasn't stupid. The young master's intent for doing these are quite clear. She had also come from the countryside. Her family was quite poor. She felt very moved as she picked up the purse and put it on her quilt, packaged it, and wiped her tears while she left. It was hard serving the miss. The young master had noticed it. He truly is a kind-hearted and good child. She quickly reached her ancestral home by the hillside. Grandpa liked to grow flowers. He was dressed like a gardener, and even wore a big sun hat as he worked in the yard. In the last life both Qin Yuhua and Xu Ning did not realize, they only found out the old president had this kind of hobby after living there for a long time. The ancestral home is very large. They drove for quite a while before reaching the entrance. The yard was even wider. In the peripherals is a circle of pine trees of various shapes, and there were various flowers nearby. It was managed very beautifully. There were no messy branches, the leaves were crisp. You'll like it however you look at it. But of course, there were commissioners responsible for these matters, just that old people who had retired can get quite bored, and normally he really liked these flowers and plants, thus he took the time to prune the plants alongside the gardeners, water them, catch bugs and the like. The car stopped, the driver opened the car door, and invited Qin Yuhua down. Xu Ning had only showed his face after. Grandpa didn't turn around to look, but the two gardeners nodded, that counted as a greeting, and they lowered their heads and picked up some big shears. The ground that had just been watered was still slightly damp. Xu Ning took a deep breath, immediately attracting Qin Yuhua's dissatisfaction. "Didn't I instruct you to keep calm and easy?" "That's not it, there's water on the ground mother, you should go this way." Qin Yuhua's expression immediately turned complex. Her family background wasn't great, and she became a homewrecker, and even gave birth to a kid. The servants in the residence definitely all look down on me. You want to play a game of authority? Who has Qin Yuhua been afraid of? If not to become Mrs. Xu, who would give you lot face? For Qin Yuhua to resist and swallow up her words in front of Xu Cheng was fine, but she needs to have dignity in front of the servants. If not, other people would take her for an easy target to bully. There would inevitably be many more issues popping up in her daily life. A darkness flashed past Qin Yuhua's eyes. "You want me to make a detour? You want to see me as a joke? You even want to see me embarrass myself by falling down, don't you?" Ah! Her right leg swiftly stepped down hard, kicking up a few specks of mud unknowingly splattering over her shoes. Even the left side of her pants were caught with a few drops. They were dark and round, not too obvious, but if it was dirty, she can no longer wear it. The steward only came out now to receive them, and here's another one that doesn't respect her as the mistress. It felt like a fire had been lit up in Qin Yuhua's anger. The more angrier she was, the more beautiful the smile on her face. Qin Yuhua curled her mouth. "Good day to you, steward. Old hag. Good day to you, madam, the roads have been hard on you. Today is the big day that I enter the house." "Look, I was interrupted by two servants." The steward saw the smudge on her snow-white trousers, and found the culprit following Qin Yuhua's line of sight. The old head of the house shook his head, and only then did the steward speak. "Please go in and change first, I'll take care of these people immediately. I won't let it trouble you." "Don't," Xu Ning frowned, and pulled Qin Yuhua's arm. "They aren't in the wrong, we were just careless. Don't fire them, all right. Besides, we can just wash it if the clothes got dirty." "Foolish child, do you know that these clothes are shipped over from France? Designer clothes. They're not some cabbage on the streets. Not making them compensate me is already very benevolent. Xiao Ning, your kindness will only make these lazy and irresponsible people even more unbearable." Xu Ning's mouth moved, and lowered his head with eyes full of disapproval. He did not say anything. In his heart he was actually overjoyed. Cheating his mother and whatnot felt too good. The previous gardener resigned because his waste was no good, and right now they were all new employees, freshly recruited from the talent market. They had no relations at all with the people at the ancestral home, and no backers either. They can't do anything to the steward, so naturally they bullied the weak and feared the strong. Qin Yuhua naturally was not a short-tempered person. She had things prepared at her fingertips early on. She raised her head, and brought Xu Ning into the living room. The steward shook his head. "The new mistress has a big attitude." "Grandfather, what should be done now?" Grandfather was naturally the head of the family. "What more can be done? Xu Cheng wanted to marry no matter what, and argued so stiffly with me. We'll talk after she's done birthing her kid." The two gardeners were grieved. They felt that this mistress was too overbearing. they didn't want to accept other arrangements, and left immediately with their compensations. After all, this was an old family, low-profile yet luxurious. Xu Ning was very familiar with this place, but he had no choice but to pretend he were a child who had not seen this before. He secretly observed the hall, fitting of their identity. Qin Yushuo was very unsatisfied with this, yet deliberately pretended to look heartbroken. Xu Qing had been waiting here since early on. He pulled Qin Yushuo's hand. "You're here." Qin Yushua gave Xu Cheng's gentle palms a squeeze, and her cheeks blushed. "This is Xu Ning." Xu Ning, he had been called this since he was young. He did not follow his birth mother's surname of Qin. Qin Yushua's intentions were obvious. Xu Qing naturally sent people to the countryside to obtain information, and even secretly did a paternity test. If not for him finding out that Qin Yushua was pregnant coincidentally, would he have missed his opportunity with this son as well? "Ning Ning, I am Xu Qing, your father. In the future you will live here. You have your grandfather, your older brother, and even a little brother in the future. Don't you think that's great?" The stately man radiated with dignity. He projected a great aura. His eyes that were normally peerlessly sharp and keen were affectionately gentle. He raised his mouth, smiling tenderly. It was not like this in his previous life. Xu Ning had failed to make contact with Xu Heng, and made Xu Qing relatively concerned. He almost did not get to live in the ancestral home. "Really, Dad's good complexion is just like the northern lights of the North Pole. You can hope for it but you cannot beg for it." He could come across it, but could not obtain. The stalwart man's smile forever belongs to Xu Heng. Sometimes Xu Ning would also ponder, is he really his child? Could it be related to the previous wife? Mom said business marriage had no affection. That would be Xu Heng's reason. He was too outstanding. Right now Xu Cheng's eyes were on Xu Ning, full of parental affection, giving Xu Ning some feelings of envy. He subconsciously pounced over, hugging the man's strong waist. "The regret of my last life, I will make up with it in this one. I will remember this embrace till I die." Today his dream was finally met. How joyous! He was so happy he lifted his head embarrassedly. Xu Ning would rather bury his head deeply, and tighten his hands. Xu Qing froze. A feeling he had never felt before slowly rose up, gradually filling his entire body. This is the affection of kin. He originally thought he would never have offspring in this life. He stuck to his wife's oath, and treated Xu Heng well. Xu Qing had always thought that his affectionate father and filial son relationship with Xu Heng was quite good, very satisfying. But now that he felt the feeling of a biological son's, throwing himself into his embrace, it made the strong-willed man's eyes redden. Xu Heng just happened to come out, standing at the stairway on the second floor. His gaze flashed. Qin Yushua's heart felt very excited. She didn't think this cannon fodder could actually please Xu Qing. The task was done as soon as they came. The little sweetheart in her belly had not been born yet. Even if he were born he would still just be a baby. He had no fighting ability at all. How could he be Xu Heng's opponent? But now that she looked at it, even if Xu Ning kept mumbling, it was enough to deal with Xu Heng. With a glance, the figure on top of the stairs seemed very languish, hesitant. Should he hide, or should he come and face the music? His only father is hugging another child. His heart would definitely feel very pained, right? "Your tramp mother makes me uncomfortable," idling her time away. It was time to expose her. The woman's sarcastic and disdainful gaze fell on top of his body, like there were diseases by the side. Another person came down from upstairs, wearing leisure clothes. Xu Heng took 2 steps towards him and helped the senior. "Grandpa. Why aren't you going down? I don't want to disturb Dad." "Good child." Xu Gao was about 60 years old. He had heart disease. He went up through the elevator at the back, washed his hands, and changed his clothes before he came down. The old man had an extraordinary air, steady pace. The hair on both sides of his temples were going white. His gaze was deep, very well maintained. With the gaze from his one eye he could make people feel his pressure. Qin Yushua immediately poked Xu Qing. "Eldest son, an old man is here. It's time to separate yourselves." after all Xu Ning's public identity was that of an adopted child and not a biological one, it was strange for him to bring him into his embrace. After separating, at the moment where the warmth had dissipated, both Xu Cheng and Xu Ning felt a bit unwilling. For the long term, let's figure this out first. Dad, Xiao Heng. Qin Yuzhua greeted them first, appearing very gentle and virtuous. This is Xu Ning, my foster child, from now on we're a family. Xu Gaoan naturally knew Xu Ning's identity. He did not know about his disposition before because he had not seen him. After seeing what happened at the car he knew that this is a clear-minded and kind seedling, just came from the wrong circumstances, to be shoved to a wildly ambitious mother. Only due to that did he endure so many hardships. Thankfully they took him back. Thinking of his biological grandchild wandering outside for 13 years, the old man felt his heart tighten up unbearably. He was extremely unsatisfied with how his son had handled things. What foster child? If you've entered this door then you are my family, enter him in the family register tomorrow. Xu Qing frowned slightly, and looked towards Xu Heng. He was worried that he would be unsatisfied. Xu Heng was a field of calm, he did not have any objections. He wasn't a biological child himself, since the biological one came, yet his feelings were still cared about. To be faked as a foster child that he felt grateful. Guess I'll pretend I don't know. It should be so. Xu Qing happily patted Xu Heng's shoulder. You've grown up, sensible and modest. How about you come to the office and learn from me during the summer vacation? There was a question mark, meaning it was a question. Xu Qing treats Xu Heng very well, his tone of speech was gentle, and he would even lower his stance. Qin Yuzhua suffered immensely inside her heart. Damn child, you actually let him go to the company. Nasty brat, wait for me to take care of you. Xu Ning gave Xu Heng a sweet smile, his big eyes glittered. I remember you. Big brother. Xu Heng curved the edge of his mouth on a once-in-a-thousand chance, fleetingly. You're good. You're good too. Just like that, a big family had a happy atmosphere. Only Qin Yuzhua nearly died from anger. Old people enjoyed peace and quiet when they are old, for entire stories belong to him, undisturbed. The third floor is Xu Cheng's territory. There is a bedroom, a study, a gym, and so on. If the master bedroom had no place for her then whatever works, but she was not even allowed to live in the room beside it. Isn't this a face slapping? Do you think you can just drop my reputation to respect the previous wife, and respect Xu Heng's feelings? You're dead and you're still here to disgust me, too hateful. Xu Ning had also been oppressed by Xu Heng. The second floor's master bedroom belonged to Xu Heng, the room beside is Xu Ning's. There wasn't even a study. Actually it wasn't small, just that some people's hearts were too big. Once dissatisfied, the devil will be born in his heart. They ate together at night. The old man's left-hand side is Xu Cheng, Qin Yuzhua, right-hand side is Xu Heng, Xu Ning. Xu Ning wanted to get closer to Xu Heng, but the time is not right. His gaze flashed, there will be a chance at night. Following the flow of time, the sky dimmed. You could not see your fingers if you stretched your hands out outside. Xu Ning smiled proudly, and knocked on Xu Heng's door while hugging a big pillow. Notes. Old hag, Lao Bus Ida, immortal bitch, literally means, can't die from old age, bullied the weak and feared the strong. Nie je sier wan zi, to pinch soft persimmons, they can't take on the strong so they bully the soft ones instead. Grandfather, Lao Yi Zi. Now before anyone asks why the guy's grandson is the steward, he's not, and I know some of y'all still gonna ask that. This word is used similarly to refer to people like the godfather/Adon, or someone's father/Gramps, or an old person, though in these cases they are usually slang. Diseases. Okay, so I don't actually know what the word is because it got censored. That's the sentence if anyone can figure it out. Old man, Lao Ba, a casual albeit rather rude way to refer to your father. Time to pass out, good night. Chapter 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xu Ning wanted to get closer to Xu Heng, but the time is not right. His gaze flashed, there will be a chance at night. Following the flow of time, the sky dimmed, you could not see your fingers if you stretched your hands out outside. Xu Ning smiled proudly, and knocked on Xu Heng's door while hugging a big pillow. Knock knock knock. Xu Ning was in a good mood, he took a deep breath, and gathered his spirits. He can finally get along well with his brother. He felt slightly perturbed, slightly anticipating, but even more so he was nervous. He had hated him for a lifetime, but his mind was finally clear when he was dying, that sort of encompassing in concern, the feeling of not being abandoned no matter what was too good, he regretted it. Thankfully, he had gone back to the time before he went seeking an early death. He can do everything over again. The door opened. Xu Ning felt a little bit excited, the edge of his eyes were damp, but it's a shame he could not apologize to his brother for the things in the past. Xu Heng was wearing his pajamas, expressionless, his cold gaze fell on the child's face, there was not a single bit of change. Sorry that I'm scared. Go look for your mom. With a "Ka," the door was closed. That's it. Xu Ning froze stupidly, still standing right where he was. He nearly got hit on the nose by the door. Shit, everything had been going so well recently, he had forgotten how extremely cold his brother was. He was the kind of person who kept people 1,000 miles away from him. So what now? If he returns, then this was a failure. Xu Ning had a calcium deficiency, his legs had started to hurt after standing for a while. He stretched his hand out to rub it to relieve it, and suddenly the door opened. Actually, the computer in his room was linked up to monitoring devices. The look of the dejected child who had stood outside till his legs hurt but was still unwilling to leave, he took in the scene. He was definitely hiding something. But he was the biological son of his adopted father after all, he can't treat him badly. Why aren't you leaving? I'm scared. Xu Ning can be scared. Then he's been possessed. Now he was sleepy and tired, as he yawned his tears dripped down as well. Xu Heng wrinkled his eyebrows deeply. Where's your mom? Does she normally coax you to sleep? A 13-year-old child did not need to be coaxed at all, just that Xu Heng's mother was strict with him, and he had no little brother. Even the few friends Xu Heng has did not dare to speak about this kind of nonsense in front of him. So this has caused Xu Heng to think that the thin and withered Xu Ning still needed mother's milk and needs to sleep with his mother. He rubbed his eyes. Xu Ning's big eyes had become even more wet and glistening. Mother is not in the room on the first floor. Xu Heng felt very hesitant. Children were generally very annoying. Every New Year's those distant relatives would come to closen their relationships. The children they brought all had bright wonderful eyes, pleasing people with other intentions. Xu Heng disliked them very much. Should he look for the steward? Whatever, it's too late. Come in. I passed. Xu Ning lowered his head, and walked in with quick steps. Brother's room is too dark. That's not right. It should be that all the furniture and whatnot were all black. Is his inner heart very dark? Xu Ning stumbled over his legs. With an sound he fell forwards. His pillow had also fallen. Luckily Xu Heng's eyes were quick and his hands were fast, and he pulled the little child's waist towards his embrace. You be good, or go back and sleep. The baby was nearly scared to death. Xu Ning had no disagreements, and nodded his head continuously. But big brother, you seem to have forgotten to let go. Xu Heng, who was carrying Xu Ning the whole way, headed towards the side of the bed. Do you have any habits of wetting the bed, snoring, or moving around wildly in your sleep? Nope. Xu Ning shook his head once more like a rattle-drum, secretly thinking what the hell is peeing the bed equals. Xu Heng put down the child gently, letting him read his head on the pillow, then lightly pulled up the quilt, gave him a pat, and gave him a careful once-over, then tucked in the edges of the quilt. Only then did he feel assured and laid down on the other side. Turns out, brother has such an attentive side. What boring person, weren't people just putting labels on him without understanding him? Moreover, the light smell of this quilt smells very good, same as the smell on his brother. There is a cozy feeling. Xu Ning, who had waited till it was very late to execute his plans, really was extremely tired. He endured and stayed up. After waiting till the breathing of the person beside him had smoothened out, only did he dare to observe Xu Heng's perfect side profile. during the day he was cold as a sculpture, while at night he was peaceful as an angel. He secretly thought that it was no wonder that father likes him, who wouldn't like him. After yawning a few times, Xu Ning fell deeply asleep. Right at this moment, Xu Heng opened his eyes. Inside was a field of cold, where was there even a hint of warmth? Is this Qin Yushua's intention? What is she trying to do now? He quietly got out of bed. Xu Heng turned on his computer, checking the surveillance record. Xu Ning's small body came into sight. He touched and groped around as he went towards the first floor, seemingly afraid of the dark. There was no reaction even after knocking several times. Xu Ning stretched his hands out and pushed. The door opened. He went in for a minute and left. He could see clearly the lost look on that small face. The yawning Xu Ning returned to the stairway on the second floor and looked towards the third floor. After hesitating for a moment, he came to the front of Xu Heng's room. After watching the full process, Xu Heng once again adjusted the time. The image went back 2 hours prior. Qin Yushua was holding a pillow and a quilt, tiptoe up to the third floor, and entered Xu Cheng's room. This woman is full of schemes. Grandfather intended to let her clear her head, understand the limits, and stop vainly hoping for things that do not belong to her. However, the woman was too clear about the weight in her hands, and sneaked into her husband's room at night, not allowed to sleep in the same bed. I can sleep on the sofa, that's not against the rules. If there was a policy, then there is a countermeasure. Qin Yushua is very clever, and she was pregnant as well. Once the child has been born, grandfather's attitude will change immediately. Xu Cheng liked Xu Heng, but Xu Gao did not like Xu Heng. He turned off his computer. Xu Heng walked to the side of the bed and sat down, quietly looked towards Xu Ning's small face. He's too thin. When he caught him under his arms, he could feel the meat around the side of his waist. Everyone thought that Xu Heng did not know the true identity of Xu Ning, but he had already investigated everything early on. Xu Ning originally had a good disposition. After returning to Qin Yushua's side, this woman started to instill some bad ideas into him, instructing the child to do bad things. Thinking back on the situation when they first met, Xu Heng made a decision. Early the next morning, after Xu Ning woke up, he awkwardly realized that his current situation was a bit too thin, and long legs were pressed on top of brother's abdomen, while brother's big warm hands were coincidentally pressed against his own legs. I'll be detested. He quickly moved away mysteriously, pretending nothing had happened. He breathed a sigh of relief. Xu Ning's heart was beating madly. He secretly rejoiced, feeling complacent. Xu Heng only opened his eyes now. The edge of his mouth curved up slightly. This child's leg is too thin. Breakfast was unexpectedly made by Qin Yushua. She had probably woken up before the sky was bright, and busied herself for several hours. Her intentions of currying favor were clear. Xu Gao sat at the master's seat and watched the home wrecker deliberately serving them to curry favor, and felt extremely uncomfortable. The child she had birthed previously was thrown to the countryside, and now that she's pregnant with this one, she still could not nurture it properly. He was so pissed that even his beard stood up. How could the sun not see through this? Xu Cheng secretly touched his wife's little face that had turned white from working hard, and inwardly felt a pain in his heart. Xu Gao humphed coldly. Only then did the lingering scene disperse. Great, Qin Yushua had started to play the looking down and vex trick again. Xu Cheng gave him a glance unhappily. Dad. Yushua has already entered the doors, and even had 2 children, can't you just accept her? Fine, I can't control you. When Xu Gao stood up, he saw Xu Ning also had his head lowered, slightly unhappy. When are you going to send Ning Ning to school? Xu Cheng frowned. Ning Ning just arrived, he still hasn't adapted. It's not too late for him to go after the summer vacations end. You think this is a kindergarten playhouse? What kind of character is Xu Gao? He is a complicated person, and at this moment his anger suddenly flared up and he slammed his hand on the table. Has your infatuation with this fox caused you to go silly? Go out and find a random person, ask them if it's right to do that. The old man turned and left up the stairs. He even pushed away the steward who tried to help him. One could imagine how angry he is. Xu Heng's face was immensely cold as well. This is definitely Qin Yushua's plans. What is she actually scheming? There was about 2 more months before summer vacation. There's no crime in skipping school, innocently skipping school. You actually plan to turn Xu Ning useless, don't you? That was probably the reason for grandfather's anger. Xu Cheng was displeased. Eat. Qin Yushua unexpectedly spoke. Ah, Cheng, I'm sorry, it's my bad, I'm not good enough. I will work hard to improve myself, I won't make things hard for you. You're not at fault. He patted the woman's hand. Xu Cheng's heart ached. Ning Ning had just come back. He feels very unfamiliar with this family, and towards this father, me, as well. He does need to ease up a bit more. Your idea was not wrong, it's just Dad, he's too stubborn. When he's free he can bring Xu Ning out to play, chat, and take walks to enhance their relationship. Qin Yushua's idea is very good. I'm full. Xu Heng got up to leave. The eldest son had only moved his chopsticks. Is he unhappy? Xu Qing made a wise guess and found several reasons, and agreed to send Xu Ning to school. Qin Yushua smiled gently, but her hand was clenched tightly into fists under the table. This undying old bastard is not my opponent, but the small one is abominable. In the previous life Xu Ning had no way to curry favor with Xu Qing. He had been thrown off to school on the second day. The changes in this life were very big. He reckons that Qin Yushua wanted to partner with him to catch that old man, then deal with Xu Heng. As long as Xu Heng is gone, there was no harm in that old man being stubborn. The Xu family is one of the best families in the city. With one word Xu Qing had already settled him into the best school. When he received the notice that afternoon, Xu Ning did not feel anything. He had entered this school last time. There were even some rich playboys in there. They had no status at home, but they got along well with himself. When something happened, they all scattered one by one, and even went to the prison to laugh at him. Being good brothers is just bullshit. They'll only come to find you when there's something they need from you. Once you've lost your value, then there will be no more connection, and even get stepped on. Inside the university, Xu Heng sat quietly. He held his chin with his arm thoughtfully. Su Jin had gotten used to Xu Heng's attitude since a long time ago, but he was particularly silent today. Could it be that you've encountered any problems? That's good news. He had actually answered honestly. Su Jin narrowed his eyes. He wanted to show his concern, but right then the teacher came over. Xu Heng, congratulations for getting first place. The events hosted by the school did not have much meaning. Xu Heng is the school's NO1, so he has to take part, so he signed up for Go, and as expected he came first, and got a reward. It's normal for the teacher to come and congratulate him. After all, she felt proud. The teacher's child just happened to be 13 years old. Xu Heng was suddenly interested in talking. Teacher Wang, what should be done if a child's height is below the minimum standard? The teacher raised an eyebrow. How old is the child? 13. Same as my son. You should take him to the hospital for a checkup first, then listen to the doctor's advice to improve his diet, supplement whatever is lacking, take note of his rest and mental health, drink more milk, and increase the amount of exercise adequately. All of these can help improve it. So that's how it is. That little guy is too thin and small, way below standards. He's not developing properly. This information had been searched up by Xu Heng on the net. It's incomplete, but it had already made him very uncomfortable. That woman only knows how to use her son to strive for favor. If this goes on, Xu Ning will become crippled. What use is that to her? Xu Heng narrowed his eyes. He deepened his earlier decision more and more. The teacher did not leave, and was quite concerned. How tall is the child you were talking about? Don't know. The teacher pouted her lips and continued with another question. What about his weight? Is his skin yellowing? Xu Heng replied seriously. Looking at the two asking and answering back and forth, Su Jin was at a loss. The atmosphere was too strange. The guy who swears by silence is golden actually had this part of him. Abnormal. Who is that kid actually? Some prince. Curiosity is the devil. Su Jin developed a strong interest in the child's identity. The teacher had only left when class started. Su Jin immediately asked. Which family's young master? My little brother. Fuck me, you only acknowledge people when a 13-year-old has malnutrition. All this information points to the truth, that is an illegitimate child that can't see the light of day, he should not exist. For a moment Su Jin's gaze was extremely gloomy, and thought about the previously aborted illegitimate child in his family. A bloodthirsty coldness flashed past. Do you need help? Chapter 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fuck me, you only acknowledge people when a 13-year-old has malnutrition. All this information points to the truth, that is an illegitimate child that can't see the light of day, he should not exist. For a moment Su Jin's gaze was extremely gloomy, and thought about the previously aborted illegitimate child in his family. A bloodthirsty coldness flashed past. Do you need help? Shu Heng, who sat upright, slowly turned his head over. His gaze was extremely cold, with not an ounce of emotion. Su Jin is the heir apparent to the Su family. He possesses extraordinary knowledge, and his ability to resist pressure is unmatched, but when facing Shu Heng now, his forehead was covered in sweat, and he lowered his proud head. Can I lay a hand your mom? With one sentence, it made Su Jin feel more comfortable in his heart. But after all, he is an illegitimate child that will contest over the inheritance with you. How could that be compared? What if your little brother wants the family company? Get a fresh start. I have confidence in prospering. Even if the direct descendant to the Su family were to go out and mix around, his status is still set in place. People won't cut him off. He can live a good life as long as he's not mentally retarded. Su Jin understood. The killing intent in his eyes dispersed. I'm sorry for just now, I shot my mouth off. There's no need for this between friends. If you have anything to say in the future, just say it. In the worst case scenario, I'll give you a beating. Between brothers, do you need to be so domineering? Su Jin pouted his mouth, and magically groped a piece of candy from his body, threw it in his mouth, and concentrated on the lesson. Shu Heng, who had returned very early, went up the stairs to look for that little one. Shu Ning was currently fiddling with his new phone while lying on the bed. No matter how new it is to him, it's still an antique. The screen isn't big, it's no fun to even play games, but after all this was carefully selected by his old man. Naturally it was what he wanted, and he loved it so much he would not put it down. The evening sun shone on the child's body, making the scene look extremely gentle and warm. Because he was shaking his legs with his knees raised, a snow-white section was exposed, with a crystal-like shimmer. It was extremely beautiful. Until he was covered by a quilt, only then did Shu Ning notice that this person had entered. It's cold at night, take note to stay warm. Shu Heng's condescending inspection plastered on the small face. His body was so pale, why did his complexion get worse? But the big eyes had more agility than usual, long eyelashes spread out like a fan, high nose, and thin lips, just like his dad. What's big brother looking so steadily at me for? Shu Ning's heart beat like drums. He couldn't resist blinking his eyes. He seemed to look very pitiful. From today on, you have to drink milk in the mornings and at night. I'm going for my routine body checkup tomorrow, you go as well. It was an affirmative sentence, and can't be rejected. Shu Ning nodded his head obediently, looking quite adorable. He swallowed nervously, and Shu Heng immediately left. Shu Ning breathed a sigh of relief. This guy didn't make any noise at all. Could he be a ghost? He shrugged subconsciously, and continued familiarizing himself with the phone's functions. He casually sent a text message to Shu Cheng, expressing his thanks. Shu Cheng was very busy. Qin Yuzhua had just been pregnant for 2 months, and naturally wasn't willing to idle around at home, and stayed in her husband's company to help out. At night Shu Gao happily finished his meal with his 2 grandkids, and sat in the living room sofa to chat. When it was time to go up to rest, Shu Gao handed out a red envelope. Shu Ning froze, secretly thinking that in his previous life his dad gave him a red envelope worth 50,000 when he just entered the house, and in this lifetime it was probably gone, but he didn't think his grandfather would be so generous. Shu Heng gave Shu Ning a push. If the elder grants it, you can't not receive it. Thank you, Grandpa. Xu Ning stretched his hands out and received it, feeling quite happy. Everyone just thought he did not understand the worth of this red envelope, so they did not mind, but actually the cases that he had cooperated with in his previous life often netted him several tens of millions, unless you directly slapped a check on his face, otherwise he would not act because of money. Xu Gao's heart blossomed with happiness. No matter how Xu Heng had called him grandpa, he did not feel anything. A biological grandson is great after all. It was great no matter how you saw it. He touched his beard. Xu Gao stood up and clasped his hands behind his back, and left with an unpredictable and deep look on his face. Xu Heng stood up and walked upstairs. Footsteps sounded behind him. Xu Heng, who had always been a lone wolf, had not gotten used to it. He wrinkled his eyebrows and looked back at him. Xu Ning responded slowly and lifted his head as he drank his juice. "Brother." The voice was soft. Xu Heng did not know what to say. He turned around and walked up with quick steps. The sound of running came from behind him. He could imagine how fast the person's short legs moved. Unconsciously, Xu Heng slowed down his steps. Only then did Xu Ning manage to catch up with him. A strange feeling rose up in him. Xu Heng touched his chest, and did not pay it any mind. After that, Xu Heng went to the study. Xu Ning quietly stayed in his room, until the dead of night. Then Xu Heng's door sounded once again. The small child hugged the pillow as he rubbed his eyes. He looked up with a weeping face. Xu Heng is very tall, about half a head taller than his peers. Standing in front of this bean sprout he looked like an adult. "Can't sleep. The living room is scary. There's nobody there. Mom says she's not coming back today. Brother, can I sleep on your bed?" Xu Heng looked steadily at Xu Ning for a moment, then made way for him. Xu Ning breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Trying to get close to the great god, really isn't something a mortal like me should be doing. He hurried in, and laid down well on the bed. Attacking his territory is the first step, giving him brotherly respect is the second, and opening up his heart is the third step. Now don't even mention occupying his territory. He couldn't even take care of Xu Heng's vigilant heart. Xu Ning felt that the road to revolution is a long one. Xu Heng turned around and went downstairs to warm up a cup of milk, then handed it over to Xu Ning, and stared at him till he finished it. "Wait for me at the school gates after school tomorrow." Xu Ning's face did not change. He hesitated for a moment and immediately flew into Xu Heng's embrace, and immediately let go when he noticed his whole body going stiff. He lifted up a smile. "Brother, you're so nice." That moment when they touched just now, Xu Heng nearly pushed Xu Ning away. The little one had already obediently laid down on the bed, big eyes glittering. Seeing no movements from himself, he even dropped his head uncertainly. He stretched out a thin, small hand and patted to his side. "Come on, L.cmm." He suddenly felt a bit unhappy, his heart jittery. Why is that? Xu Heng did not think about it, and laid down on the place where the child had patted. His heart felt strange again, he did not know why. He closed his eyes, smoothened out his breaths, and the child was very gutsy this time. He leaned over to observe. His exhaled breaths puffed onto Xu Heng's neck, like a brush sweeping past, very itchy. If not for Xu Heng's high resistance, he definitely could not resist sitting up and giving a lecture to this naughty kid who wouldn't sleep. Regardless of whether his core was 30-some years old, his body's age is still that of a teen. After a short while, Xu Ning fell asleep. Xu Heng opened his expressionless eyes and got up. He turned on his computer and looked at the monitor. It's just as the child said. Then he picked up his phone to take a look. Qin Yushua did in fact send a text message mentioning that she is not coming home. Xu Ning that is probably trustable, right? Xu Heng went back to bed and laid down. Xu Ning rolled over as if he were afraid of the cold. The two sticking together made Xu Heng feel slightly unaccustomed. He shifted inwards before falling asleep. In the dead of the night, Qin Yushua finally came back. The contents of the text message was naturally to cheat Xu Ning into sleeping early. If not, Xu Cheng would not let her go to the office if he knew the child could not sleep without waiting for his mother. Qin Yushua had high ambitions. Of course she would not allow anyone to hinder her. Tiring, after getting pregnant, doing anything made her feel out of strength. Since the husband isn't coming back anyway, Qin Yushua directly went to the first floor to sleep. Waking up the next morning, a certain child again, he blushed to his ears, his calf was caught in between his brother's thighs.